distinguished delegates and dear participants, I declare open the sixth meeting of the 55th session of the Human Rights Council. As planned in our schedule, we will continue with the high-level segment and we'll open this meeting with giving the floor to His Excellency Mr. Peter Szijjártó, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. Mr. Minister, you have the floor. Minister, please, you can come to the podium, Your Excellency. You can come, please. Yeah.
Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we have been living in the age of dangers. Contrary to all our expectations, the first couple of years of the 21st century have been characterized by wars, crises, an ever-growing threat of terror, and massive waves of illegal migration. As a consequence of all these, there have been serious debates going on about human rights. And unfortunately, in the meantime, human rights are being violated consequently as well. So I think it's very, very important at the outset to clarify what do belong to fundamental human rights and what do not. So as a clarification, everyone does have the right to have a safe life at his or her home. Everyone does have the right to freely practice his or her religion. And everyone does have the right to preserve, to stick to his or her national identity. But in the meantime, no one does have the right to violate border between two safe countries. No one has the right to murder anyone with a reference to any ideology or religion. And no one does have the right to take away the right of others when it comes to access to mother tongue. Hungary stands up very strongly for the protection of the human rights, both at home and in the international political organizations. So, Mr. President, let me emphasize three short points. First, as a consequence of our very special history, there are millions of Hungarians who are living outside of Hungary. And 150,000 out of these millions are living at the western end of Ukraine. And up to 2015, they used to have a well-established set of rights. But these rights, unfortunately, have been violated and diminished step by step. And the access of this Hungarian community to its own mother tongue has been seriously limited on the field of education, culture, media, and public administration. Based on the current regulations in Ukraine, 99 Hungarian minority schools had to cease their operation as minority schools last September and had to continue as Ukrainian schools, only partly teaching on the language of the minority. We Hungarians do stick to the approach that the Hungarians living in Ukraine must get back all their rights which they used to have up to 2015. We don't demand anything which could be considered as extra. We just would like to get back those rights which the Hungarians used to have already by 2015. The second point of mine, Mr. President, Your Excellency, is that Hungary has been confronted with an extraordinary migratory pressure throughout the last 9 years, as being located at the external border of both the European Union and the Schengen area. And we do know it from a first-hand experience that migration is a dangerous phenomenon. It is a dangerous phenomenon firstly because it constitutes a vicious circle with terrorism, as the migratory flows offer a possibility for the terrorists to hide among the migrants. Therefore, they can spread their ideologies and can commit terrorist attacks in many places of the world. And second, we do consider migration as a dangerous phenomenon based on the experiences in the western part of Europe, where parallel societies have been established in many countries. We have now seen the modern age anti-Semitism on the rise in the recent months. And we all do see the allowed minorities putting pressure on those communities which form the majority and have been living in their places for centuries. International law, Mr. President, must be respected in this regard. International law speaks very clearly. Those who have to escape from their homes do have the right to stay temporarily on the territory of the first safe country. But first safe country, not the second, not the third, or not the fourth. So therefore, Hungary has been protecting its borders, and we will continue to do so. In the last 2 years, we have stopped nearly 500,000 illegal migrants. But in the meantime, we bring help where it is needed. We bring help to those communities which have been confronted with serious challenges in order to enable them to stay and to live among peaceful circumstances. My third and last point, Mr. President. Hungary has been a country with a more than 1,000-year-long Christian statehood. Therefore, we do feel a special responsibility for communities over the world, especially nowadays, as Christianity proves to be the most persecuted religion all over the world. Thousands of Christians do have to face attacks and persecution on a daily basis, and we have to speak about this very openly as well. So therefore, Hungary has already spent more than $100 million on supporting the Christian communities in need all around the world in order to enable them to stay where their communities had been living for centuries or an even longer period of time, and not to be eliminated, because elimination of these Christian communities is exactly the goal of the terrorist organizations and those with extremist ideologies. To sum up, Mr. President, I'd like to assure you that Hungary will continue to stand up for the protection of the human rights back at home and here in the international political arena. And we will continue to support the activities of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Special Representative on minority issues as well. Mr. President, thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. وأعطي الكلمة الآن للسيد وزير العدل في السودان السيد معاوية عثمان محمد خير محمد أحمد فليتفضل.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. في المستهل أتقدم لكم بالتهنئة على توليكم رئاسة هذا المجلس، وعبركم أهني السادة أعضاء المكتب المنتخبين، مجددا صيغة حكومة السودان في قدرتكم على قيادة هذا المجلس ما يحقق المبادئ السامية لحقوق الإنسان ويعزز روح الحوالي والتفاعل الإيجابي. وسوف يعمل السودان من موقعه كعضو بهذا المجلس لتحقيق هذه الأهداف. السيد الرئيس، أخاطبكم اليوم والحرب في بلادي قاربة تكمل عاما كاملا منذ اندلاع تمرد ميليشيا الدعم السريع في 15 أبريل 2023. وقد تابع مجلسكم الموقر كيف انطلقت شرارة الحرب عندما شنت الميليشيا المتمردة هجومها الغادر والمباغت على المرافق السيادية والاستراتيجية الرئيسية التي كانت تحرسها في عاصمة البلاد، بما في ذلك القصر الرئاسي ومطار الخرطوم والقيادة العامة للقوات المسلحة وبيت الضيافة مقر إقامة فخامة رئيس مجلس السيادة الانتقالي بغرض الاستيلاء على السلطة بقوة السلاح وأسر قائد الجيش ورئيس البلاد أو قتله، كما أعلن قائد التمرد في الساعات الأولى بعد الهجوم. ولذلك لن يختلف أسنان في توصيف ما يحدث سوى أنه تمرد مكتمل الأركان على الدولة، وما أن خابت مساعي الميليشيا في تحقيق الاستيلاء على السلطة حتى دخلت في حرب مفتوحة وشاملة على الدولة بكل مكوناتها وعلى الشعب بكل فئاته. فكانت حملات التدمير والحرق والتخريب الممنهج للمرافق القومية وممارسة أبشع الانتهاكات للقانون الدولي الإنساني وقانون حقوق الإنسان واتفاقيات جنيف الأربع وبروتوكولاتها ذات الصلة، حيث تمادت الميليشيا المتمردة في التنكيل بالمواطنين واحتلال منازلهم وارتكاب أبشع الانتهاكات بحقهم من قتل وتعذيب واغتصاب واستغلال وتشريد. أما فيما يتعلق بجرائم الميليشيا وفظاعتها في دارفور خاصة ولاية غرب دارفور، فقد وثقت تقارير الأمم المتحدة والمنظمات الدولية جرائم التطهير العرقي التي ارتكبت بحق قبيلة المساليد ذات الأصول الإفريقية في ولاية غرب دارفور. وقد تابع مجلسكم الموقر الجرائم الصادمة التي قامت بها الميليشيا في مدينة الجنينة والطريقة التي تمت بها تصفية والي الولاية خميس بكر والتمثيل بجثته. وقد طفحت التقارير ووسائل الإعلام بعمليات تصفية الأسرى وتعذيبهم بل دفنهم أحياء في تلك الولاية، وملاحقة حتى الفارين الذين حاولوا عبور الحدود إلى تشاد. السيد الرئيس، لن يكفي بيان مدته 5 دقائق لسرد أقل القليل من فظائع الميليشيا المتمردة وجرائمها بحق الشعب السوداني، ويكفي أن نشير إلى أن ما يربو على 8 مليون سوداني تم تشريدهم بقوة السلاح من منازلهم التي احتلت من بعضهم من قبل الميليشيا، بينما هنالك ما يربو على 2 مليون من الذين عبروا الحدود إلى دول الجوار. ومن هذا المقام فإننا نشكر جميع دول الجوار التي فتحت حدودها للاجئين السودانيين، ونشير في هذا السياق إلى أن السودان الذي كان يستضيف ملايين اللاجئين من دول الجوار والإقليم وهو في طليعة أكبر 7 دول إفريقية مستضيفة للاجئين، ها هو شعبه الآن يضطر إلى اللجوء لدول الجوار هربا من بطش وترويع الميليشيا المتمردة. أما الجانب الآخر من فظائع الميليشيا فهو استهدافها المستشفيات والمرافق الصحية وتحويل بعضها إلى مقار وسكنات عسكرية. ونشير هنا إلى أن 80% من المستشفيات والمرافق الصحية في العاصمة الخرطوم لم تعد في الخدمة. السيد الرئيس، إن علاج الأزمات والنزاعات يبتدي دائما بالتصنيف الصحيح للأزمة وتوصيفها بما يجري في السودان هو تمرد غادر. ما يقوم به الجيش السوداني إنما هو الواجب الدستوري الأصيل للجيوش في كل دول العالم. وفي هذا السياق نشير إلى أن القوات المسلحة السودانية ظلت وستبقى ملتزمة وبصورة صارمة بالقانون الدولي الإنساني والقانون الدولي لحقوق الإنسان وقواعد الاشتباك المدني وكافة المبادئ ذات الصلة بحماية المدنيين، وهي تتصدى لهذا التمرد الغادر الذي وكما تعلمون له امتداداته الإقليمية والدولية. وتوثقت تقارير الأمم المتحدة الدول المتورطة في ذلك، ولذلك حري بمجلسكم الموقر أن يدعم ما تقوم به القوات المسلحة السودانية، وهي تتصدى لهذا المهدد الذي يتجاوز خطره السودان إلى الإقليم بأسره. فالسودان هو رمانة الاستقرار في وسط القارة ولكل المنطقة الممتدة من ساحل البحر الأحمر وحتى سواحل غرب أفريقيا. وبالتالي فإن ما يقوم به الجيش السوداني إنما هو من صميم مهامه الوطنية الدستورية وفي ذات الوقت صيانة الأمن القومي في هذه المنطقة. ولذلك فإننا نناشد المجتمع الدولي الكف عن أي إشارة إلى ما يسمى بطرفي النزاع، فهذا توصيف خاطئ ومرفوض. إذن الحقيقة المجردة هي أن هنالك جيش وطني، القوات المسلحة السودانية، يتصدى لميليشيا متمردة وذات تاريخ طويل في ارتكاب الفظائع والانتهاكات. السيد الرئيس، السودان يؤكد التزامه الكامل بتسهيل إيصال المساعدات الإنسانية، وتعتمد الدولة مؤخرا حزمة الإجراءات الجديدة الخاصة بالمسار السريع في إيصال المساعدات الإنسانية وتسريع كل الإجراءات والمطلوبات من جانب المنظمات الدولية. وإذا نجدد شكرنا لتلك المنظمات والمجتمع المانحين، فإننا وفي إطار المسؤولية المشتركة للأسرة الدولية تجاه أزمتنا الإنسانية نناشد المانحين الوفاء بالالتزامات التي أعلنت من زمان الماضي لتوفير التمويل اللازم لخطة الاستجابة الإنسانية الطارئة، كما نطالب المجتمع الدولي عبر أجهزته المختصة بالضغط على الميليشيا المتمردة وإدانتها للتنصل عن كل من إعلان جدة الموقع في 11 مايو 2023 واتفاقية جدة الموقع في 20 مايو 2023 واستمرارها في استهداف مستودعات المنظمات الإنسانية وإقامة الارتكازات في الطرق الرئيسية والسطو على متحركات العون الإنساني، الأمر الذي أعاق إيصال المساعدات للمتأثرين. وذلك فإننا باسم حكومة السودان نطالب بتصنيف هذه الميليشيات كمنظمة إرهابية. وشكرا جزيلا السيد الرئيس.
أشكركم معاليكم. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapetritis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. High Commissioner, President of the Human Rights Council, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to address the high-level segment of the 55th Human Rights Council, and I wish to express our high appreciation for the work of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and assure him of our continued support. Mr. President, only cohesive societies with robust institutions can provide for functional democracies, peace and prosperity. However, the challenges to individual human rights are on the rise. It has been 2 years since the illegal and unethical Russian invasion of Ukraine. We stand by Ukraine in its fight for the sovereignty and territorial integrity because this constitutes a defense of the values of liberal democracy and of international law against aggression and revisionism. At the same time, in the Middle East, humanitarian principles are being seriously hampered, with tragic loss of civilian lives and the use of hostages as bargaining tools in a blatant violation of human value. While humanitarian aid needs to continue uninhibitedly, hostilities ought to stop immediately and peace should be fully restored. We're also mindful about ongoing conflicts worldwide, where the rights of women and children are substantially violated, and, of course, in the Red Sea, where the safety of navigation is crucially jeopardized. Greece, following a rule-based foreign policy, will continue to strongly oppose any illegal use of force and to advocate for the peaceful settlement of disputes and the full respect of international law. Mr. President, Greece domestically follows a specific pattern when it comes to human rights policies. We employ multifaceted strategic master plans for the protection of vulnerable groups based on the principles of non-discrimination and diversity. In this vein, we implement several action plans, among others, on gender equality, protection of minors, equal opportunity for people with disabilities, integration of refugees, LGBTQI+ rights. Only a few days ago, the Hellenic Parliament adopted new law providing for same-sex marriage. As of 2015, the Hellenic Coast Guard has saved more than 500,000 lives of migrants at the seas, whereas all applicants for refugee status are provided with humane living conditions and speedy processing of their applications. And of course, we constantly place particular emphasis on the Muslim minority of Thrace in the northern east part of Greece, as its members enjoy both special protections as a minority and their full rights as Greek and EU citizens. All this despite totally unsubstantiated comments heard yesterday in this room. The demographic development of the minority in the last 100 years is an eloquent proof that it continues to thrive and prosper. Mr. President, for more than 20 years, in my capacity as Professor of Constitutional Law, before joining politics, I was trying to convey to young people the need to respect universal and indivisible rights. Yet, the current situation calls for an imminent revisit of traditional concepts of human rights law. Rights that have been overlooked for decades need to come to the forefront. Among others, the right to food and water, and the right of enjoyment of a peaceful life, including the overall prohibition of any forcible or de facto displacement of people, but also the rights of future generations, including the obligation of the states to apply resilient and sustainable policies against climate crisis and against overconsumption of natural capital. And above all, Mr. President, world leaders must identify and set in place mechanisms effectively to implement rights protected by international law and primarily by the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. No one should be able to escape without being held accountable for action violating globally acknowledged rights. Based on these premises, Greece is presenting its candidacy as non-permanent member of the Security Council for 2025-2026 and for membership to the Human Rights Council for 2028-2030. To this end, we will continue our support to effective multilateralism, thus working closely with all countries and all UN human rights mechanisms to safeguard and advance freedom, equality and inclusivity. There is no room for delay. Yesterday is lost. Tomorrow might be too late. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à Son Excellence, Monsieur Don Alfonso Zun Moki, troisième vice-premier ministre de la Guinée équatoriale. Vous avez la parole.
Señor Presidente, señor Alto Comisionado, distinguidos delegados, miembros de la sociedad civil, señoras y señores, me presento de nuevo ante vuestras excelencias para informar sobre la situación de los derechos humanos en la República de Guinea Ecuatorial, así como los esfuerzos del Gobierno y de las instituciones cuyo fundamento se basa en la promoción, protección, defensa y garantía de los derechos humanos. Señor Presidente, en nombre de mi Gobierno y de su Presidente, Su Excelencia Obiang Mbasogo, les expresamos un saludo de paz y de sosiego, sumándonos a las felicitaciones de los oradores precedentes al Presidente del Consejo de Derechos Humanos y el Alto Comisionado en un homenaje que os merecéis en la responsabilidad de dirigir este periodo de sesiones. En los últimos años hemos materializado acciones positivas y consiguiendo importantes logros. La lucha contra la trata de personas, la lucha contra la corrupción, las inspecciones periódicas en todas las cárceles del ámbito nacional para verificar las detenciones arbitrarias o arrestos ilegales, el reforzamiento de las capacidades de los gendarmes sobre la aplicación de la Ley número 6/2006, reguladora de la prevención y sanción contra la tortura. Con la asistencia de UNICEF se ha puesto en marcha el proyecto de modernización del sistema del registro civil de nacimientos de niños y se ha elaborado un anteproyecto de ley sobre el registro civil en la República de Guinea Ecuatorial. En el marco de la implementación de las recomendaciones del examen periódico universal, Guinea Ecuatorial ha sancionado la Ley número 4/2022 sobre el Código Penal, en cuyo artículo 26 queda abolida totalmente la pena de muerte en Guinea Ecuatorial. Señoras y señores, permítanme resaltar algunos logros alcanzados según las recomendaciones de nuestro último examen periódico universal. la capacitación y sensibilización en todo el ámbito nacional para establecer una buena gobernabilidad al servicio público, la elaboración de la ley reguladora de la prostitución y el derecho de los homosexuales, el apoyo a la mujer ecuatoguineana para su participación efectiva e igualitaria conforme a los programas de acción de Dakar y de Pekín, respectivamente, la elaboración del Plan Nacional de Acción Multisectorial de Promoción de la Mujer y Equidad de Género, el Programa Multisectorial de Lucha contra la Violencia de Género. Se ha elaborado una hoja de ruta del Plan de Acción Nacional relativo a la Resolución 1325 del Consejo de Seguridad sobre Mujeres, Paz y Seguridad en la República de Guinea Ecuatorial. La preparación del anteproyecto de ley de los derechos de las personas de tercera edad, el decreto número 147/2023, por el que se adoptan medidas para la protección de menores en la República de Guinea Ecuatorial. La creación de centros de menores de Riaba y Teguete, el programa de inclusión social en las personas con discapacidad en el INSESO, la materialización de lo preceptuado en la Ley número 5/2009 sobre la inspección y vigilancia en los tribunales y juzgados del ámbito nacional, la creación de una base de datos de las personas procesadas y condenadas por los órganos penales, la aplicación efectiva de la Ley 1/2004 sobre el tráfico ilícito de migrantes y la trata de personas, la ratificación de la Convención Internacional sobre la Corrupción y la adopción de la Ley número 17/2021 sobre la prevención y lucha contra la corrupción en la República de Guinea Ecuatorial, el establecimiento de estructuras y organismos que componen el Sistema Estadístico Nacional para asegurar la colecta de datos, procesamiento y análisis de las estadísticas oficiales, la adopción de la Estrategia Nacional de Desarrollo y Sostenibilidad Agenda Guinea Ecuatorial 2035, la creación de distritos sanitarios, la creación de la Agencia Nacional de Desarrollo de Guinea Ecuatorial, el decreto número 2/2021 sobre la adopción de menores en Guinea Ecuatorial, la Ley General de Educación que recoge la gratuidad de la enseñanza preescolar, primaria, entre otros. Señor presidente, Guinea Ecuatorial ha asumido el compromiso de forjar una democracia firme en la que sostenemos la independencia del Poder Judicial y una garantía jurídica en sus relaciones internacionales dentro del respeto escrupuloso de su Constitución. Reafirmamos de nuevo el compromiso de nuestro país con el sistema internacional de los derechos humanos y nos abrimos al escrutinio de la cooperación internacional, expresando así nuestra voluntad de mejorar esta cooperación. Muchísimas gracias.
I thank Your Excellency. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Yvonne Dozab, Minister of Justice of Namibia.
President of the Human Rights Council, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, allow me to congratulate you on your election as President for the 55th session of the Human Rights Council for 2024. Further, Namibia extends its sincere appreciation to all member states and the entire international community for their expressions of sympathies and condolences to the Namibian nation on the sad passing of our beloved President, Dr. Hage G. Geingob, who was laid to rest 3 days ago. The late President Geingob's voice resonated strongly in advocating for democracy, human rights, and inclusivity, where growth and prosperity are shared among all peoples of the world. He worked tirelessly for an inclusive society and shared prosperity for all Namibians, guided by the principles of unity, peace, and justice. Mr. President, Namibia welcomes the theme of this session that focuses on the policy, legal, and institutional arrangements that affects the lived experiences of persons with disabilities. There is no doubt that we need to do more the world over. Consistent with the letter and spirit of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Namibia believes that the twin rights of equality and non-discrimination of people with disabilities are sacrosanct to ensure persons with disabilities lived a dignified life. As a testimony of our commitment to better the lives of persons with disabilities, Namibia pays a special maintenance grant for children with disabilities and a grant for adults with disabilities. This coincides with the mantra of our late president that no one should feel left out wherever you are, whoever you are. Mr. President, sadly, persons with disabilities across the world continue to face multifaceted challenges, thereby making them more vulnerable and susceptible to abuse. Namibia particularly wishes to place emphasis on the rights of persons with disabilities in situations of armed conflict and natural disasters. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, and I quote, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members," end of quote. What will the finding be today if we, as the international community, are measured on how we treat our most vulnerable children, women, and persons with disabilities in times of armed conflict, natural disaster, or even in everyday life? Mr. President, gender-based and sexual violence, including domestic violence and child sexual exploitation, remains a disturbing phenomenon in Namibia and the world over, despite progressive legislative, policy, and institutional arrangements in place. We recognize that socioeconomic and behavioral factors, including unemployment and poverty, are some root causes that creates this lopsided state of affairs. Accordingly, we call on all of us to strengthen collaboration among key stakeholders for a drastic shift in responding to these evils. Our late president often reminded us that, and I quote, "Inclusivity spells harmony, whereas exclusivity spells conflict," end of quote. We must therefore continue to create spaces for dialogue to ensure peace and stability in the world, including in the Southern African region. Namibia, like many developing countries, remains vulnerable to the asymmetrical impacts of climate change. We remain concerned about the impact of climate change and global warming on the enjoyment of all human rights. We therefore commit to addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Mr. President, we are deeply disturbed by the increasing escalation of violence in the occupied Palestinian territory, especially the besieged Gaza Strip, and we thank the Council for its advocacy to stop the violence. Namibia condemns the horrific atrocities being committed on the people of Palestine and calls for an immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Israel from Palestinian territory, and for Israel to be held accountable for the carnage in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. We urge the international community to join this call. We simply cannot stand by and watch idly. In the same vein, we reaffirm our unwavering support for the realization of the inalienable right of the people of Western Sahara to self-determination, in line with the UN Charter and the AU Constitutive Act. We further call on all concerned parties to refrain from any further exploitation of Western Sahara's natural resources, as such exploitation undermines the future reconstruction and development of Western Sahara and its potential to become a viable state. We urge the Kingdom of Morocco to fully adhere to the principles and goals enshrined in the AU Constitutive Act, especially the need to respect colonial borders as they existed at the time of independence. Mr. President, as I conclude, the upcoming Summit for the Future, which Namibia will co-facilitate with Germany later this year, is an important moment in world history. Given where we find ourselves, strengthening multilateralism is our beacon of hope. We must take stock of how far we have come when we declared, and I quote, recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, end of quote. Collectively, as states, we should create a future where every individual is valued, respected, and empowered to live a life of dignity, fulfillment, and the pursuit of happiness. This, for Namibia, includes the universal recognition of the right to self-determination and development for all peoples of the world. I wish you all success with this session of the Council. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Hassan Mahmoud, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh, by video message.
Mr. President, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to address this Council. Bangladesh was born out of a long struggle against injustice, misrule, discrimination, and oppression. Our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, envisioned a country that would uphold the principles of equity, inclusivity, democracy, and human rights. His ideals inspired us to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms for all of our citizens. Under the prudent leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, the government of Bangladesh has been relentlessly working to mainstream human rights in our national discourse through participatory democracy, independent judiciary, free media, and vibrant civil society. Recently, Bangladesh conducted its 12th parliamentary election in a free, fair, impartial, inclusive, and transparent manner. Alongside our commitment to uphold the civil and political rights of our citizens, we have adopted visionary, bold, pragmatic, and inclusive measures for ensuring their economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development. In our vision for development, vulnerable and marginalized sections of society features very prominently. Ladies and gentlemen, driven by our commitment to human rights and dignity, we sheltered over 1 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas of Myanmar. Despite our limited resources, we continue to ensure their safety and security. However, the Rohingya crisis without an end inside is causing frustration not only for these people, but also for their host community. Uncertainty around their repatriation has the potential to have spillover effects on regional peace and stability. We expect the international community to remain firmly focused on this crisis and to keep investing in their well-being, safety, and dignity, and help realize their right to return to their homeland in Rakhine. Bangladesh will continue to work with Myanmar and other governments and regional organizations for a durable solution to this crisis. Also, we urge the international community to mount pressure on Myanmar to comply with the ICJ order and all human rights and international judicial mechanisms. Mr. President, Bangladesh strongly condemns indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians, including women and children, and demands an immediate end of Israeli brutalities in Palestine. We consider these deliberate acts of aggression and blatant violation of international human rights and humanitarian laws, including the Genocide Convention. Bangladesh reiterates its call for an immediate permanent ceasefire and for the rapid and unhindered provision of life-saving assistance to Gaza. We call for an end to Israeli occupation of Palestine and a permanent solution to this crisis through the establishment of a sovereign and independent Palestinian state along pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Excellencies, for millions, development is urgent human rights imperative. Challenges like poverty, hunger, inequality, digital divides, and complex humanitarian emergencies, lack of institutional capacity, environmental degradation and disasters hinder efforts to ensure the human rights. Climate change is one of the greatest threats to the enjoyment of human rights of ours and succeeding generations. Supporting just transition and ensuring climate justice for those countries who hardly had any contribution to the occurrence of climate change deserves to be discussed in a meaningful manner by the international community. We call upon the Council as well as UN and its mechanism to work for galvanizing international cooperation to address the challenges faced by the developing countries in realizing human rights. Mr. President, Bangladesh strongly condemns repeated acts of public desecration of Holy Quran and various acts of Islamophobia. Freedom of speech and expression must be exercised with responsibility. It should never be recklessly used to spread hatred and protect hate speech that threatens peaceful coexistence of people of various faiths. Mr. President, Bangladesh has remained constructively engaged with human rights bodies and mechanisms. In recent years, we have welcomed visits of 6 special procedure mandate holders in Bangladesh. Last November, we participated in the 4th cycle EPR of Bangladesh and have accepted most of the recommendations made in the Council. As we have placed in UDHR 75, our engagements and openness concerning the practice of human rights will continue. Mr. President, to conclude, as a member of the Council, we would like to see that the Council continues to deliver on its promises to support the nations across the world to uphold human rights in line with the principles of universality, impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity. Thanks to you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Joel Hernandez Garcia, Vice Minister for Multilateral Affairs and Human Rights of Mexico, by video message.
Apertura a la cooperación, el diálogo y el escrutinio internacional, elementos centrales de nuestra política de Estado en la materia. Durante la administración del presidente Andrés Manuel López Obrador, México ha ratificado 8 tratados de derechos humanos y se ha mantenido al día en el envío y sustentaciones de informes de cumplimiento de instrumentos internacionales. Hace menos de un mes ocurrió la 4ª presentación de México ante el mecanismo de examen periódico universal. En el mismo periodo, 7 titulares de procedimientos especiales y órganos de tratados del Sistema Universal y del Sistema Interamericano de Derechos Humanos han visitado México. Apenas en septiembre pasado recibimos la visita del Grupo de Trabajo sobre la Detención Arbitraria. El Gobierno de México ha priorizado los derechos de las personas en situación de vulnerabilidad bajo el principio por el bien de todos, primero los pobres. En ese sentido, la política social y de derechos humanos de México se ha enfocado en la atención de las causas estructurales de la desigualdad, la discriminación y la violencia. Entre 2018 y 2022, el porcentaje de la población en situación de pobreza multidimensional en México se redujo 5.6%. Es decir, 5.1 millones de mexicanos dejaron esa condición. En el mismo periodo, el salario mínimo por día se incrementó casi un 120% en la mayor parte del país y en la zona libre de la frontera norte tuvo un crecimiento del 231%. En México también ha disminuido la incidencia delictiva en un 6.2% a nivel nacional. Entre 2018 y 2022, el secuestro se redujo en un 75%. Los homicidios disminuyeron en 24.7% y el robo a casa-habitación disminuyó 36%. Mi país tiene una larga tradición de defensa de los derechos de las mujeres, jóvenes y niñas en toda su diversidad, lo que se ha consolidado con su política exterior feminista, siendo el primer país del sur global en adoptarla. De manera paralela, estamos conscientes de que México tiene que avanzar en temas clave para la garantía y protección de los derechos humanos. En ese sentido, mantenemos un diálogo constante con el Comité de Naciones Unidas contra la Desaparición Forzada, siendo el único país que ha recibido una visita y ha realizado 2 diálogos. México se encuentra llevando a cabo una estrategia nacional de búsqueda de personas desaparecidas o no localizadas que ha logrado ya la localización de 16.681 personas. Asimismo, reconocemos la importante labor de las y los defensores de derechos humanos y periodistas para el fortalecimiento de nuestra democracia y el Estado de Derecho. México cuenta con un mecanismo para la protección de personas defensoras de derechos humanos y periodistas, cuyo presupuesto fue incrementado un 175% de 2018 a 2023. Y para finales de 2022 se amplió en un 70% la plantilla de su personal. Asimismo, el número de personas beneficiarias del mecanismo aumentó un 172%, alcanzando ya 2.265 personas beneficiarias. Me referiré ahora a las personas en situación de movilidad. En 2023 se superaron los registros de solicitudes de refugio y de protección internacional. En los últimos 10 años, el número de solicitudes de refugio se ha incrementado un 1000%. En 2023 se alcanzó la cifra récord de 140.982 solicitudes. En ese contexto, en octubre de 2022, el presidente López Obrador recibió a sus homólogos y a otros altos representantes de 10 países de la región en el encuentro de Palenque, en el que los países acordaron trabajar para enfrentar de manera conjunta la realidad migratoria bajo un enfoque de derechos humanos, priorizando en todo momento el bienestar de nuestros pueblos. México continuará impulsando una vocación humanista y redoblará esfuerzos para alcanzar sus compromisos internacionales en materia de derechos humanos, particularmente a la luz de nuestra candidatura al Consejo de Derechos Humanos para el periodo 2025-2027. Muchas gracias.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à Son Excellence, Monsieur Mamoudou Kassogué, ministre de la Justice et des Droits de l'Homme du Mali. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur le Ministre.
Merci infiniment. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, à l'entame de mon propos, permettez-moi, Monsieur le Président, de vous adresser mes très chaleureuses félicitations pour votre accession à la présidence du Conseil des droits de l'homme et vous assurer du soutien total de mon pays pour le succès de votre mandat. Mes remerciements vont également à Monsieur Volker Türk, haut-commissaire des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme, ainsi qu'à tous ses collaborateurs. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais tout d'abord réitérer les engagements pris par le Mali lors de son passage au 4e cycle de l'examen périodique universel, au cours duquel il a accepté 223 des 275 recommandations formulées. Je voudrais également réitérer les 3 engagements pris par mon pays lors de l'événement de haut niveau organisé ici même en décembre 2023, dans le cadre de la commémoration du 75e anniversaire de la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme. Monsieur le Président, depuis plus d'une décennie, les activités des groupes terroristes et criminels dans mon pays constituent le principal facteur de violation des droits de l'homme et du droit international humanitaire. Durant cette période, la présence de la mission multidimensionnelle intégrée des Nations Unies pour la stabilisation au Mali, MINUSMA, n'a pas permis d'apporter aux défis sécuritaires les réponses attendues par le gouvernement et les populations maliennes en raison de l'inadaptation de son mandat au contexte de guerres asymétriques. C'est face à ces constats et à la demande du gouvernement du Mali que le Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies a, par sa résolution 2690 du 30 juin 2023, décidé de mettre fin au mandat de la MINUSMA à compter du 31 décembre 2023. C'est le lieu pour moi de saluer la mémoire de toutes les victimes, civiles et militaires, étrangères comme maliennes, tombées sur le champ d'honneur au Mali. Monsieur le Président, il est heureux de constater aujourd'hui que la situation sécuritaire globale et des droits de l'homme dans mon pays s'est considérablement améliorée. Ce résultat a été obtenu grâce aux effets combinés de la montée en puissance des forces armées maliennes avec l'appui de certains partenaires stratégiques et surtout de la récupération de la ville de Kidal des mains des groupes armés terroristes. Ces efforts se poursuivront. Monsieur le Président, tirant les enseignements de la mise en œuvre de l'accord pour la paix et la réconciliation au Mali issu du processus d'Alger, signé en 2015 et désormais caduc, le président de la transition, chef de l'État, son Excellence le colonel Assimi Goïta, a pris l'option de privilégier l'appropriation nationale du processus de paix et de réconciliation à travers l'organisation d'un dialogue intermalien. L'objectif recherché à travers ce processus intermalien est d'éliminer les racines des conflits communautaires et intercommunautaires qui ont longtemps affecté la paix et la cohésion nationale. Monsieur le Président, s'agissant des réformes politiques et institutionnelles, je voudrais souligner pour m'en réjouir l'organisation réussie du référendum constitutionnel le 18 juin 2023 et la promulgation de la nouvelle constitution le 22 juillet 2023, toutes choses qui participent de la volonté des plus hautes autorités de mon pays pour un retour à l'ordre constitutionnel. Monsieur le Président, nous sommes parfaitement conscients du fait que la responsabilité première de protection des populations civiles incombe à l'État. C'est pourquoi le gouvernement s'est investi pour lutter contre l'impunité sous toutes ses formes. À ce titre, il déploie des efforts importants en vue d'enquêter sur toutes les allégations de violation des droits de l'homme, y compris celles formulées à l'encontre des forces de défense et de sécurité, nonobstant quelques contraintes objectives qui entravent certaines procédures. Par ailleurs, l'opérationnalisation en 2024 de la Direction nationale des droits de l'homme s'inscrit dans cette dynamique de renforcement du dispositif national de protection et de promotion des droits de l'homme. Monsieur le Président, en vous réitérant solennellement l'attachement de mon pays aux principes fondamentaux, universellement reconnus en matière de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme, je souhaite exprimer la vive préoccupation du gouvernement du Mali face à l'instrumentalisation et la politisation continue des droits de l'homme, ainsi qu'à la politique de 2 poids 2 mesures adoptée par certains États membres en cette matière. C'est pourquoi j'exhorte le Conseil à réserver le même traitement à toutes les situations de violation des droits de l'homme dans le monde, y compris celles perpétrées en ce moment contre le peuple palestinien. Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le gouvernement du Mali réaffirme par ma voix sa volonté de poursuivre, dans le strict respect de sa souveraineté et des intérêts vitaux du peuple malien, sa coopération avec tous les mécanismes chargés de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme, y compris l'expert indépendant des Nations Unies sur la situation des droits de l'homme au Mali. Pour terminer, je voudrais inviter la communauté internationale et tous les partenaires à accompagner le Mali afin d'apporter une réponse durable à la crise multidimensionnelle qu'il traverse depuis plus d'une décennie et à inscrire leurs actions dans le cadre du processus de dialogue intermalien en cours initié par le président de la transition. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie Votre Excellence pour votre déclaration. And now I give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Pindi Chana, Minister for Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania, by video message.
President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of civil society and non-governmental organizations, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to address the 55th session of the Human Rights Council. At the outset, allow me to start by conveying greetings from the people and government of United Republic of Tanzania and salutations from Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, who extends her regards and wishes to all a successful session. Mr. President, the fundamental right of freedom of expression and the right to information continue to be upheld with vital, flourishing democracy. In this regard, the government of United Republic of Tanzania continues to ensure that media pluralism prospers. As of today, there are more than 200 radio stations, more than 60 television stations, 390 online TVs, 73 blogs, and 300 newspapers and magazines in the United Republic of Tanzania. This number should be expected to rise. Access to justice is also key to maintain peace and stability. The government has prioritized raising legal awareness on Constitution, human rights, and relationship between rights and duties, as well as civil and criminal justice system through a national campaign in Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar known as Mama Samia Legal Aid Campaign, named after Her Excellency, our President, Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, in consideration of her call for justice for all without discrimination. The campaign is a homegrown initiative aimed at addressing the pertaining needs and concerns throughout the country. The government is standing by its commitment to accelerate and advance women's economic empowerment through co-leading the Generation Equality Forum Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights. The country has made great progress towards advancing gender equality in leadership and decision-making at all levels, with more women being appointed to lead key positions. At the highest level, the President currently is a woman, Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. The Speaker and the Clerk of the National Assembly in Tanzania, United Republic of Tanzania, are women. Chief Secretary in Zanzibar is a woman as well, and 35% of ministers are women. Also, the percentage of women parliamentarians is 37%. And the number of women judges has risen to 5 in Zanzibar. That is from 40% to 60%. Mr. President, talking of economic, social, and cultural rights are also given equal importance. Great strides have been made in enhancing access to water, with 72.3% coverage in rural areas and 86% coverage in urban areas. The United Republic of Tanzania recognizes the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions. In this regard, I would like to take this opportunity, Mr. President, to assure member states and human rights advocates that the government of United Republic of Tanzania is exercising a voluntary relocation of people living in Ngorongoro Conservation Area with the objective of ensuring that all people concerned get equal opportunities to enjoy the rights I have just mentioned. And that is why the government has always been transparent with the international community on the challenges in the Ngorongoro conservation area. That is why we hosted a mission visit by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in 2023 and a UNESCO advisory mission this year to Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Also, the United Nations Independent Expert on the Right of Indigenous People is scheduled to undertake a mission visit to the Ngorongoro Conservation Area this year. We therefore refute all allegations of forced eviction of the local communities residing in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, as has previously been alleged in this forum. In conclusion, the United Republic of Tanzania reaffirms its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights for all its people. We shall also continue to cooperate with the Human Rights Council and its mechanism and meet our obligations under the human rights treaties we have ratified, as we remain allied, associated to the spirit and mandate of the noble work of the Human Rights Council. Mr. President, I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to His Excellency Lord Tariq Ahmed of Wimbledon, Prime Minister Special Representative for Prevention of Sexual Violence in Conflict and Minister of State of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, it's a huge pleasure to join this extremely important gathering and meeting. And let me say from the outset that the United Kingdom has been and remains proud to stand up for freedom, proud to stand up for democracy. We welcome the spotlight that this institution, the Human Rights Council, shines on the worst violations and indeed egregious abuses of human rights, and this Council's important work to hold those responsible to account. There is much to reflect upon and indeed comment on, and I welcome this opportunity to address this gathering with a focus on three key areas. Beginning, if I may, with President Putin's continued barbaric assault on Ukraine. And frankly and directly put, this has been marked by appalling violations of human rights. Let us just look at the last week. In the last week alone, we have seen reports from Ukrainian authorities of their soldiers being executed by Russian forces. The Independent Commission of Inquiry has uncovered mounting evidence of war crimes, and including possible crimes against humanity. These range from acts of torture and sexual violence to the killing and forced deportation of innocent civilians, the forced deportation of children as well. It is vital to establish the full facts, of course, and gather the necessary evidence. It is only then that we collectively can bring those responsible to justice. It is also imperative, in our view, that this session renews the Commission's mandate. And if I may, Mr. President, just turn briefly to matters within Russia. I'm sure I speak for many gathered here and beyond, who were all appalled by the news of Alexei Navalny's death, a courageous individual who himself paid the ultimate price, the price of fighting for democracy, the price of his life. and we must therefore hold the Russian authorities fully accountable. I'm sure everyone in this hall today and beyond join me in offering our deepest sympathies to Mr. Navalny's family. And we are pleased, finally, after many requests, that his remains have been returned to them. There must, though, be a full and transparent investigation into the circumstances of his death. And in doing so, we reiterate our call for the release of all those imprisoned in Russia on political grounds. And I put on record a specific call on behalf of our Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary and myself for the immediate and unconditional release of our national, a British national, Vladimir Kara-Murza. And I say to Russia, it is time to act responsibly. Release him, and release him now. I am also, as part of my responsibilities, the United Kingdom's Minister for the Middle East. And I want to now turn briefly to the situation of the ongoing conflict in that region, in Israel, and of course, the plight of innocent civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories. And let me be clear of our position. The immediate priority must be for the fighting to stop immediately. This is the best route to secure the safe release of all hostages currently held in Gaza, and importantly, vitally, to get desperate life-saving aid into Gaza. And I stress again that this must happen, and happen now. We want this cessation, and of course there is much discussion underway about the current diplomatic efforts of which the United Kingdom are a part, that this cessation must lead to something which is sustainable, a sustainable ceasefire. And what does that mean? And I just want to outline the United Kingdom's clear position on this. A sustainable ceasefire, the crucial word is sustainable. It means calling time on all the fighting. It means no return to further fighting. It means for an irreversible momentum towards permanent peace and the delivery of a two-state solution. I assure all members here that we urge Israel to limit its current operations specifically to military targets. It needs to protect civilians, civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. Civilians being protected in conflict is a red, and it is a must-do. The number of people killed now, some estimates put them as high as 30,000, including those from Gaza itself. But every life matters. From the 1,200 Israeli who were killed by Hamas's terror attack, to now the thousands that have been killed in Gaza. Every life matters, and therefore we call on all parties to act within international humanitarian law. Mr. President, the prospect of a military offensive in Rafah, where more than half of Gaza's people are sheltering, 1.2 million people, is a humanitarian catastrophe waiting to happen. It would have disastrous consequences for civilians sheltering there. They have nowhere to go. They can't go north, they can't go south. We must all collectively prevent this. And I assure all of you that we, the United Kingdom, have voiced our strong views to Israel in this respect. Meanwhile, we have also taken further action. There are extremist Israeli settlers who are involved in some of the most egregious abuses of human rights in the occupied West Bank. And from the United Kingdom's perspective, we have taken action and sanctioned these settlers. Of course, and let me be clear, the United Kingdom, as a friend and partner to Israel, supports the scrutiny of Israel. But equally, as many countries did, we come together in deploring the terror attacks of October the 7th. And our efforts here at the Human Rights Council must be to provide the basis for the realization of that sustainable peace. The United Kingdom, to be clear, works to see all countries face appropriate scrutiny of their human rights record, but opposes, as we've said before, just to be clear, the disproportionate focus on item 7, which damages efforts to ensure and achieve peace. But let me end this segment of my comments by saying this. The UK is, has been and will remain absolutely committed to a two-state solution. Myself and Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, have been fully engaged on this priority with our key allies, including the United States, but also our key partners and allies in the region. It is only by working together and collectively that we can guarantee the security and stability that all Israelis and Palestinians deserve. But we must seize this moment. We must generate the momentum now. Why? Well, if there is to be a legacy to all those who have been killed, that legacy must be that their life mattered. That legacy must be that we must move towards a permanent peace. That legacy must be a legacy that guarantees justice, that guarantees peace, and guarantees security for the people of two sovereign states, Israel and Palestine. Mr. President, if I may briefly, just looking across the globe, focus on a couple of other additional matters of which the UK has had a real focus and prioritisation. We will continue to press the Chinese authorities to improve their human rights record, including in multilateral institutions, where last year again we had a record number of countries signing up the statement at the Third Committee on Xinjiang. The persecution of over 1 million Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang is wrong, and we must stand collectively against it. In Hong Kong, we urge the authorities to repeal the national security law and release Jimmy Lai. Mr. President, in the time I have, I've only reflected on but 3 areas of wide areas of concern around the globe. We continue to watch developments, as others do, closely in Syria, in Sudan, in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, and indeed other countries where citizens' basic human rights are being denied. Also in South Sudan, where we've witnessed the horrendous cases of sexual and gender-based violence, as well as the targeting of journalists. Media freedom matters. And again, sadly, journalists pay the ultimate price in some parts of the world with their life. It is therefore vital that in South Sudan also, that the mandate of the Commission on Human Rights is extended. Mr. President, let me put it succinctly. Those who violate those rights must be held to account. For our part, the United Kingdom will continue to support all efforts and work most constructively, including this very Council, to ensure that is the case. Human rights, Mr. President, and their protection and strengthening across the world is the ultimate noble objective of this very Council. Defending human rights is not a nice to do, it should not be a periphery, it is fundamental in how we advocate the defending of other rights, of all rights, irrespective of who we are, where we are. Indeed, it is a litmus test, and I end with something that I believe in most earnestly as the United Kingdom's Human Rights Minister, that the real litmus test of defending human rights is not our ability to defend ourselves, to stand up for our own rights. It's the ability to articulate, advocate, and stand up for the rights of others. Mr. President, thank you so much.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Radek Rubies, State Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Czechia. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, congratulations to your election. Let me start with saying that human rights are rights that all people have, regardless of their country, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, or any other trait. As we discussed in this room last year in December, over the past 10 years, human rights have become much more protected. This, however, varies between countries. Not everyone enjoys the same protection. People are often marginalized or their human rights violated. Despite the fact that the universal desire for human rights to be respected and protected resonates in each and every country. We are living in times of pervasive conflicts, coup, and crises that have devastating impact on human rights. It is our common duty, our responsibility to fight against the cynical disregard for human rights. Human rights must get back to the center of governance. It is not up to the governments to choose which human rights suit them more than and which less. Failure to respect human rights results in instability, suffering, more inequalities, and economic crisis. Mr. President, Czechia is a staunch supporter of international human rights mechanism. We perceive a growing responsibility on the Human Rights Council for dealing with human rights crises around the globe. Serving on the Council several times, Czechia has demonstrated its strong commitment to the Human Rights Council and its mechanism. Last year, we also proudly served as the Council's presidency, during which we made progress in the implementation of three main priorities: preventive mandate of the Council, participation of all relevant actors in the Council's activities, including civil society, and progress in efficiency of the Council's work. As a significant moment, we perceived the informal meeting of the Council in Prague. Thereby, we renewed a broken tradition, provided a safe space for discussion of the most sensitive issues of the Council's work and its future. At the same time, it contributed to spreading awareness about the Council in my country. Mr. President, we believe that we can still contribute to the work of the Council, and this we candidate for the term of 2025 and 2027. The Council has played an important role in pointing out the appalling atrocities, human rights violations and war crimes by Russia in Ukraine since the full-scale, unprovoked and illegal Russian war of aggression against Ukraine on 24th of February 2022. Officially, more than 10,000 civilians have been killed by the Russian forces. Millions are suffering under Russian occupation. Here, I have to particularly highlight the sad 10-year anniversary of illegal occupation of Ukrainian Crimea and parts of Donbas. Czechia supports Ukraine and its brave people. We are appalled by the unlawful displacement of Ukrainian children to Russia. Therefore, one of our latest initiatives is joint Ukraine-EU letter signed by all EU representatives for human rights, including the Czech government Commissioner for Human Rights, regarding the abduction of children from Ukraine by Russia. The letter is addressed to the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict, Mr. Gamba, who holds a specific mandate for the given issue. Russia also violates the rights of its own people. Apart from systematic silencing of independent voices in Russian civil society and free media, there are several hundred political prisoners held. We have not stopped calling for their release. For Alexei Navalny, it is unfortunately too late. Navalny has become a victim of systematic oppression. All other political prisoners must be urgently released. The work of the Special Rapporteur to monitor the conditions in the country is even more important. People in other countries like Iran, Afghanistan, North Korea, Myanmar, Belarus or China are also suffering from human rights violations. In August 2022, the Office of the High Commissioner published a report providing evidence of arbitrary detention, torture, sexual and gender-based violence in Xinjiang. abuses that may amount to crimes against humanity. So far, no debate over the report recommendations has taken place. It is a responsibility of all of us to protect all human rights. Mr. President, as I conclude, Czechia will work with our international partners to ensure that the Council can function effectively, succeed in its numerous tasks in upholding and protecting human rights, and prevent violations all around the world. I thank you.
I thank you, sir, Your Excellency, for your declaration. And now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Marek Estok, Deputy Minister for Foreign and European Affairs of Slovakia. You have the floor, sir.
Distinguished President of the Human Rights Council, Ministers, dear colleagues, guests, I am honored to be here in Geneva today for the 55th session of the Human Rights Council. I wish to start by reminding to all of us that the human rights are not only one of the main pillars of the United Nations work, but touch all aspects of our everyday lives. Unfortunately, the human rights violation around the world continues. The beginning of the high-level segment of the Human Rights Council in 2024 coincides with the second anniversary of the start of the Russians' unprovoked and unjustified aggression against Ukraine. After 2 years, the war is still going on and continues to have a devastating impact on human lives. In times like this, the Human Rights Council, the main intergovernmental body within the United Nations system responsible for strengthening and the promotion and protection of human rights around the globe, needs a strong and principled leadership. Here, I would like to thank President Ambassador Václav Balek of Czechia for his work and strong leadership, and to congratulate Ambassador Omar Zniber of Morocco on assuming the presidency of this body, and wish you a successful mandate. You can count on Slovakia's support in your endeavours. Now, dear colleagues, I would like to focus on a few concrete topics where we see the strong mandate of the Human Rights Council. Mr. President, when it comes to the current situation in Gaza, Slovakia calls for a balanced approach. Following Hamas' October 7 terrorist attack against Israel, Jewish communities globally experience a dramatic upsurge in anti-Semitic incidents. Hate and fear has no place in today's world. It is dangerous and unacceptable. Leaders and civil society must work together to stand up against this type of violence and hate speech. We should perceive these alarming trends as a threat of each of us. At the same time, if we talk about moral obligations, we also have legal ones: to observe international humanitarian law, international law, and finally, human rights. We cannot allow the dehumanization of more than 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip because of the crimes of about 3,000 militants. Millions of civilians, women and children cannot be punished collectively. Slovakia emphasizes the validity of universal human rights all over the planet, including protection of civilians in conflicts. Mr. President, unfortunately, the human rights situation is alarming in other regions too. We recognize that the full enjoyment of human rights is not possible without providing equal opportunities for everyone. The very first article of the UN Charter highlights the importance of promoting respect for human rights and freedoms for everyone without distinction. In Kenya, for example, our projects contribute to improving health care for mothers and children, raise awareness and fight against gender-based violence, improve access and conditions for education of girls and women, support their economic empowerment and access to decision-making processes. We also support activities of local NGOs to increase women's participation in peace and security processes, including conflict prevention and resolution. Mr. President, the last topic I would like to concentrate on touches the new generation of human rights, the human rights in online space. Living in the digital era entails not only advantages in advancing promotion and protection of human rights, but also risk of human rights violation, such as censorship, intimidation, hate speech, surveillance, disinformation, or data misuse. The field of science, technology, and innovation should be safe and inclusive, a civic space in which both the right to freedom of opinion and expression and the right to privacy are protected, and where harmful stereotypes are countered. Slovakia welcomes initiative to ensure a free and secure digital future for all, respecting human rights, including the Global Digital Compact, being discussed in New York under the Summit of the Future umbrella. Dear Mr. President, honorable guests, dear colleagues, let me finish by assuring you that Slovakia will continue to work closely with the Human Rights Council and will support its efforts. We have always been a strong supporter of a collective and effective multilateralism. This is one of the main reasons why Slovakia has presented the candidacy for a non-permanent membership at the UN Security Council for year 2028-29. We will strive for constructive solutions while respecting international law. I believe that only by working together we will be able to respond to urgent human rights challenges around the world. Thank you for your attention.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sihazak Phuang Keo, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Thailand. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished guests, distinguished delegates, it was an honor for me to represent my country here in December last year as we marked the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights. The occasion reminded us of how much we have achieved and yet how much more we still have to go. The tragedy in Ukraine and in the Gaza reminds us of this stark reality and unites all of us in the promotion and protection of human rights for all without discrimination. Mr. President, in our region, Thailand continues to play its role in promoting human rights for all and providing humanitarian assistance to all in need. We are deeply concerned about the ongoing situation in Myanmar and the plight of the Myanmar people. As the immediate neighboring country, we believe it is time for all parties in Myanmar to pursue the path of dialogue and reconciliation. In the immediate term, given the pressing needs of those affected by the continuing conflict, Thailand is compelled to launch an initiative to upscale humanitarian assistance along our common border. We hope that this will be a crucial first step in the implementation of ASEAN's 5-point consensus, which calls for reduction and cessation of violence, provision of humanitarian assistance, and all-inclusive dialogue for peace. Mr. President, at home, Thailand's recent election marks a new chapter in our democracy, positioning human rights at the core of our policy agenda. Thailand is fully committed to foster even more rights-based and inclusive societies, giving priorities to addressing inequality, supporting those most vulnerable, responding to new and emerging challenges, and promoting sustainable development. Most importantly, we are committed to fully aligning our domestic legal frameworks with all the human rights instruments that we are a party to. We can and must do more at home. Later this year, we look forward to welcoming the country visits of the High Commissioner, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Health, and the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. Mr. President, I had the privilege of being President of the Human Rights Council from 2010 to 2011, during which we had to undertake the first and only review of the Council so far. The Human Rights Council is now in its 18th year. Thailand believes the time is opportune for us to be engaged in dialogue on how we can work together to ensure that the work of the Council truly makes a difference to the lives of our people. 2 weeks ago, Thailand hosted a panel discussion at the UN in New York on the future of the Human Rights Council, challenges and opportunities in maximizing the impact of the Council's work on the ground. The panel discussion was well attended with wide array of views shared on how we can increase the effectiveness of the Council, better address the issue of polarization and selectivity, and ensure that the Council's work delivers tangible outcomes beyond the debates in this hall. Practical measures which Thailand believes the Council should consider include the promotion of dialogue and constructive engagement, more cross-regional coordination, rationalization of the Council's work, the use of technical cooperation and capacity building to promote a culture of prevention, and enhancing coordination and synergies between the Council and other important bodies of the UN. Mr. President, it is in the spirit of wanting to contribute to the work of the Council that Thailand has presented its candidature for membership of the Council for the term 2025-2027. If elected, we are determined to be an active, responsible, and constructive member, building upon our past track record and helping to build coalitions for human rights in the Council and beyond in our common endeavor to address pressing human rights challenges of our time and for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Fukazawa Yoichi, Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. You have the floor, sir.
Japan. 人権理事会議長、人権高等弁務官、ご列席の皆様、日本国政府を代表してステートメントを行う機会を得たことを大変光栄に思います。まず、元日に発生いたしました能登半島地震に対して、多数の国、地域、および国際機関からお見舞いのメッセージをいただいたことに心から感謝を申し上げます。議長、今日、ウクライナ、ガザを含む中東情勢をはじめ、世界各地で多くの人々が厳しい状況に置かれている中、我々はその一人一人の人間の尊厳が守られる世界を目指すべきとの意を新たにしております。自由、民主主義、基本的人権、法の支配といった基本的価値に基づいた国際秩序が挑戦を受けております。国際社会はこれを守り抜くため、明確なメッセージを発し、行動する必要があります。議長、人権擁護は国家の基本的な責務です。その実現を支援するため、国際社会は対話と協力を続けることが重要であります。日本は国際社会の声を反映し、カンボジア自身の努力を後押しする人権状況決議を継続的に提出し、これまですべてコンセンサス採択をされております。同国の取り組みが促進され、人権状況の改善につながることを期待いたします。また、 日本は第53回人権理事会でもハンセン病差別撤廃決議を提出し、同決議は無投票で採択されました。我が国はこれからもハンセン病にかかる差別や偏見の撤廃に尽力してまいります。一方で、深刻な人権侵害に対しては、しっかりと声を上げる必要があります。自由、基本的人権の尊重、法の支配は、香港や新疆ウイグル自治区、チベット自治区をはじめ、中国でも同様に保障されるべきです。日本は中国の人権状況を深刻に懸念しており、中国に対し建設的で具体的な行動を改めて強く求めます。ミャンマーで今なお事態改善に向けた動きがないことを懸念いたします。日本は ASEAN 諸国を含む国際社会と連携し、事態の改善に向けて努力いたします。拉致被害者及びその家族がご高齢となる中、時間的制約のある北朝鮮による拉致問題は、ひとときも揺るがせにできない人道問題です。北朝鮮人権状況決議も通じ、日本は国際社会と緊密に連携し、北朝鮮に対し、拉致問題の即時解決に向けた具体的かつ前向きな行動を改めて強く求めます。議長、日本は国内でも不断の努力を続けております。日本は2020年に策定したビジネスと人権に関する行動計画のもと、企業活動における人権尊重の促進に引き続き取り組んでまいります。昨年4月には、公共調達における人権配慮に関する政府方針について決定を行いました。さらに、国際機関とも連携し、国別行動計画の策定に取り組む国への支援や、海外進出している日本企業及びそのサプライヤーに対する研修やセミナーなどを実施しております。日本は昨年、G7 議長国としてさまざまな場面において、ジェンダー問題に関する取り組みを主導し、国内でも女性活躍推進に努めております。議長、世界の人権状況の改善は一朝一夕にはなし得ません。日本は人権理事会理事国として引き続き法の支配に基づく自由で開かれた国際秩序を維持・強化していく所存です。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. Thank you. أصحاب السعادة أيها الحضور الكرام، آخر متدخل في جلستنا هذه رفيعة المستوى سيكون صاحب السعادة السيد جاسم محمد البودوي، أمين عام مجلس الدول العربية للخليج، فليتفضل مشكورا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكرام، يشرفني أن أدلي بهذا البيان باسم الأمانة العامة لمجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية خلال الجلسة رفيعة المستوى للدورة 55 لمجلس حقوق الإنسان، وأن أتقدم لسعادتكم وأعضاء المكتب بالتهنئة على انتخابكم لرئاسة مجلس حقوق الإنسان، متمنيا لكم التوفيق والنجاح. أيها الجمع الكريم، في وقت يواجه فيه العالم تحديات غير مسبوقة، نجد أنفسنا اليوم أمام مسؤوليات تاريخية تحتم توحيد إرادتنا الجماعية أكثر من أي وقت مضى للتحرك بحزم على المستوى العالمي لحماية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان في جميع أنحاء العالم. وعليه ومن هذا المنطلق أن مجلس التعاون مستندا على التزامه بمبادئ القانون الدولي ومستلهما من القيم الإنسانية والحقوق النبيلة المستسقاه من ديننا الإسلامي الحنيف، يواصل التزامه اليوم بتعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان، وما مشاركتنا النشطة المثمرة والفعالة جميعا في هذا المجلس إلا شهادة وخير برهان على التزامنا بالدعم الكامل للمجتمع الدولي في هذا المجال. السيدات والسادة، لقد اتخذت دول مجلس التعاون في السنوات الأخيرة مبادرات رائدة وهادفة لتعزيز حقوق الإنسان ولترسيخ موقعها القيادي في سياق الجهود العالمية لتعزيز الكرامة والعدالة والمساواة، وللتوضيح للمجتمع الدولي برمته صورتنا الإنسانية الحقيقية وجهودنا المتعددة التي تثبت ذلك. وخير مثال على ذلك ما وافق عليه أصحاب الجلالة والسمو قادة دول مجلس التعاون في القمة الأخيرة التي عقدت في دولة قطر بشأن اعتماد قواعد الوقاية والحماية من العنف والاستغلال والإيذاء الأسري لدول مجلس التعاون لدول الخليج العربية. كما وأن احتفالنا هذا العام بالذكرى العاشرة لحقوق الإنسان لمجلس التعاون الذي أقر في عام 2014 يعد مناسبة أخرى للتأكيد على التزام دول مجلس التعاون بحقوق الإنسان، ويعكس تماسكنا بقيمنا الدينية والاجتماعية والثقافية الفريدة، لا سيما وباعتمادنا لاستراتيجية حقوق الإنسان لمجلس التعاون للسنوات 2023-2026، فإننا حققنا علامة فارقة في مسيرتنا المشتركة والمستمرة نحو تعزيز وحماية حقوق الإنسان والتركيز على ترسيخ التعاون بين دولنا وعلى المستويين الإقليمي والدولي. وبكل فخر واعتزاز أذكر لكم أيها الجمع الكريم أن التطوير المستمر للبنية التشريعية والمؤسسية داخل دول مجلس التعاون يعكس التزامها الراسخ بحماية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان على كافة المستويات، ومنها حقوق المرأة والطفل والشباب وذوي الاحتياجات الخاصة وكبار السن، بما في ذلك وثيقة مسقط لقواعد حماية الطفل خلال مرحلة التحقيق، فضلا عن إيمانها بأهمية الأسرة باعتبارها النواة الأساسية للمجتمع، وهي أمثلة تعد شواهد حية على النهج الشامل الذي تعتمده دول المجلس، ليس فقط في سبيل دعم حقوق الإنسان، وإنما للإسهام في تحقيق رؤية أشمل لمجتمع أكثر تقدما ورخاء وازدهار تتحقق فيه أهداف التنمية المستدامة وتسود فيه المساواة وتصان فيه الكرامة الإنسانية بشكل تتسق اتساقا كليا مع المواثيق والاتفاقات الإقليمية والدولية ذات الصلة. أيها السيدات والسادة، إن معاناة الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق تكمن في صميم انشغالاتنا، فإننا وفي الوقت الذي نسعى فيه للعمل مع المجتمع الدولي تجاه رفع المعاناة وكف الأذى عن الشعب الفلسطيني، فإن مجلس التعاون كذلك يدين بأشد العبارات الانتهاكات الصارخة التي يرتكبها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بحق الشعب الفلسطيني والاستخفاف الصارخ بقواعد القانون الدولي على مرأى ومسمع المجتمع الدولي طوال فترة الاحتلال الممتدة لعقود، وآخره ما نشهده من هجوم وعدوان وحشي مستمر يشنه الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في قطاع غزة منذ أكتوبر 2023. وهنا أكرر التأكيد على الموقف المبدئي والثابت لمجلس التعاون الذي يقف إلى جانب الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق ضد الانتهاكات التي يتعرض إليها، ويطالب المجلس بالوقف الفوري لإطلاق النار ولكافة العمليات العسكرية الإسرائيلية، وضمان توفير وصول المساعدات الإنسانية والإغاثية والاحتياجات الأساسية لتخفيف المعاناة عن السكان المدنيين الذين يواجهون بشكل يومي المجاعة والأمراض والموت في كل زاوية في القطاع المحاصر. كما نؤكد على موقفنا الثابت من مركزية القضية الفلسطينية وحق الشعب الفلسطيني في تقرير مصيره ومحاسبة المسؤولين عن الجرائم المرتكبة بحقه. كما نستذكر استمرار سياسات المعايير المزدوجة وتسييس حقوق الإنسان والقانون الإنساني. من هذا المنطلق ندعو لإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وتأسيس الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة ذات السيادة على جميع الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة منذ يونيو 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وضمان حقوق اللاجئين وفق مبادرة السلام وقرارات الشرعية الدولية ومجلس الأمن الدولي. السيدات والسادة، نعرب عن قلقنا أزاء تنامي ظاهرة الإسلاموفوبيا وانتشار خطاب الكراهية، وندعو في هذا السياق لتوحيد الجهود الدولية للتصدي لهذه الظاهرة الخطيرة وبناء ثقافة بديلة تقوم على التسامح وتغليب الحوار البناء والتعايش السلمي واحترام الرأي والرأي الآخر. أما في مجال التحول الرقمي والتكنولوجي فلا بد من العمل على ضمان شفافية التكنولوجيا وجعلها تعمل مناراً لحقوق الإنسان واحترام الخصوصية والحريات الأساسية، وأننا ندرك الإمكانات الهائلة التي تقدمها التكنولوجيا لتعزيز حياة الفرد وحقوق الإنسان، ولكننا مع ذلك لا نغفل عن التحديات والمخاطر المترتبة عليها، بما في ذلك ظاهرة الأخبار المزيفة التي تهدد أسس المجتمع. وندعو في هذا المجال إلى تعزيز الوعي وتشجيع الفكر النقدي وتبني ممارسات المواطنة الرقمية المسؤولة لتجاوز التأثيرات الخطيرة لهذه الظاهرة. السيدات والسادة، ختاما أود أن أؤكد على النقطتين التاليتين. أولا، أن دول مجلس التعاون تشدد على الدور الأساسي للتضامن والتعاون الدوليين وعلى التزامها بالنهج المتعدد الأطراف والحوار والشراكات البناءة. ثانيا، أن دول مجلس التعاون ملتزمة بالتعاون الوثيق مع الأمم المتحدة والمنظمات الدولية والإقليمية، وهي على أتم الاستعداد للعب دورها في نظام حقوق الإنسان الحالي، مساهمة بصوتها وجهودها على كافة الأصعدة لتعزيز الكرامة والمساواة والعدالة للجميع. وشكرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أشكر معاليكم على البيان المقدم من طرفكم. أشكركم. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, distingués délégués, nous avons ainsi conclu le segment de haut niveau de la session actuelle du Conseil des droits de l'homme et nous allons donc entamer le segment général en rappelant que le temps imparti pour les délégations des États membres du Conseil pour leur déclaration est celui de 3 minutes, alors qu'il est de 2 minutes pour les États observateurs et les autres observateurs. Et je donne ainsi la parole au premier orateur au titre de notre segment général, en l'occurrence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de France, vous avez la parole, Excellence.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, la France, réélue au Conseil des droits de l'homme, continuera à œuvrer dans cette enceinte en faveur de cette cause au cœur de l'ambition de l'ONU, la protection et la promotion des droits de chaque personne, femmes, enfants, hommes, égaux en dignité et en droit. Au moment où le monde, plus polarisé que jamais, est traversé par des conflits dans lesquels le droit international humanitaire est bafoué, il est du devoir du Conseil de réaffirmer le caractère universel et indivisible des droits de l'homme, ainsi que nous l'avons fait lors de la 75e cérémonie du 75e anniversaire de la Déclaration universelle. Liberté et justice. Alors que la guerre fait rage à la suite de l'invasion du 22 février 2022, c'est ce que demandent les Ukrainiens. La Russie inflige depuis 2 ans les plus atroces souffrances à la population ukrainienne. Cette guerre d'agression ne concerne pas seulement l'Ukraine, elle emporte de graves conséquences pour toutes nos populations. 2 ans que la Russie viole les règles qui sont au fondement de notre ordre international, qu'elle aggrave les crises alimentaires et énergétiques mondiales. Comme l'a rappelé le président de la République, nous continuons à soutenir l'Ukraine. La Russie doit arrêter cette guerre sans plus de délai en retirant ses troupes de l'ensemble du territoire ukrainien. La Russie devra rendre des comptes pour toutes les violations des droits de l'homme, les crimes de guerre et contre l'humanité qu'elle commet en Ukraine, mais aussi sur son sol. Israéliens et Palestiniens ont le droit de vivre dans la liberté, la sécurité et la justice. Pour cela, il faut une condamnation dans les termes les plus forts et unanimes des attaques terroristes du 7 octobre commises par le Hamas et d'autres groupes terroristes. Il faut la libération immédiate et inconditionnelle de tous les otages. Il faut continuer à lutter contre le terrorisme, garantir le droit d'Israël à vivre en paix et en sécurité et affirmer le droit d'Israël à exercer son droit à la légitime défense face au terrorisme. Aujourd'hui, il faut un cessez-le-feu en vue d'un accès humanitaire complet, sûr et sans entrave à la population civile de Gaza pour lui apporter une aide à la hauteur de ses immenses besoins et souffrances. Il faut que le droit international soit strictement respecté. Il faut que cessent les violences envers le peuple palestinien, y compris celles des colons extrémistes. Il faut un horizon politique. C'est la solution des 2 États qui rétablira le peuple palestinien dans ses droits. Justice et liberté doivent être garanties pour toutes les femmes et les filles, partout. Le combat pour l'égalité, pour l'autonomisation des femmes et la pleine réalisation de leurs droits est essentiel. Ce combat passe par l'éducation, en particulier des jeunes filles. Nous n'oublions pas les jeunes Afghanes, victimes de l'obscurantisme taliban et effacées de la société. Ce combat, c'est aussi celui de l'accès à la santé et aux droits sexuels et reproductifs. La France pourrait devenir très bientôt le tout premier pays à inscrire le droit à l'interruption volontaire de grossesse dans sa Constitution. Monsieur le Président, justice et liberté passent par le respect des conventions qui définissent et protègent les droits. La France accorde donc la priorité à l'universalisation des conventions pour l'abolition de la peine de mort d'Istanbul, contre la torture, sur les disparitions forcées. Enfin, justice et liberté ne changent pas selon la latitude ou la longitude. Partout dans le monde, l'aspiration à la dignité humaine est la même. Ne cédons pas à un révisionnisme qui viendrait fracturer et relativiser ce que la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme a permis de dire. Il y a un intangible derrière ces droits qui s'applique sur la planète entière, un impératif d'humanité. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie pour votre déclaration.
شكرا. السيدات الفضليات، السادة الأفاضل، كل باسمه وبمقامه. اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أتقدم بالشكر لكل من ساهم في تنظيم هذه الدورة، والتي يأتي انعقادها في وقت تتزايد فيه معاناة أهلنا في فلسطين جراء جرائم الإبادة الجماعية التي يرتكبها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي ضمن مخططه الرامي إلى وأد القضية الفلسطينية بتجريد شعبها من إنسانيته واقتراح بدائل مزيفة وعقد صفقات مشبوهة تمهيدا لحمل الفلسطينيين على الرحيل بعيدا عن أرضهم. كل هذه السياسات وأخرى قوبلت للأسف بصمت متبق من طرف المجموعة الدولية، بل وبحصانة ودعم عسكري غير مبرر استفاد منه الاحتلال لمواصلة ارتكاب جرائمه، وهو ما أدنته حديثا وبوضوح المقررة الخاصة المعنية بوضع حقوق الإنسان بالأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة ومجموعة من أصحاب الولايات لدى المجلس. وإذ تستنكر الجزائر بشدة الانتقائية وازدواجية المعايير في عمل المنظومة الدولية الراهنة، فإنها ستعمل من جديد على الدفع بمجلس الأمن على تحمل مسؤولياته لوقف حرب الإبادة الجارية ضد المدنيين في غزة. وتتطلع الجزائر لأن يتحمل مجلسنا هذا مسؤولياته بأن يدفع باتجاه وقف إطلاق النار الفوري ووصول المساعدات الإنسانية لأهل القطاع ومنع التهجير القسري ودعم وكالة الأونروا، وأن يعمل على تفعيل آليات المحاسبة وجبر الضرر ضد الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. وإن كان هذا الشأن فلسطين، فإن الوضع في الأراضي العربية المحتلة في لبنان والجولان السوري لا يقل مأساة وتردي جراء استمرار السياسات والممارسات الاستيطانية لسلطات الاحتلال على أراضيها، وهو ذات الوضع الذي يقاسيه أيضا شعب الصحراء الغربية الذي أدرجت قضيته في قائمة الأمم المتحدة للأقاليم غير المتمتعة بالحكم الذاتي، إذ يتمادى الاحتلال المغربي في تعنته بعدم السماح للشعب الصحراوي من ممارسة حقوقه المشروعة، لا سيما حقهم في تقرير المصير في خرق صارخ للقانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة. وما الزيارة الأخيرة التي نظمت للأسف للأقاليم المحتلة والتي شاركت فيها مجموعة من الدبلوماسيين المعتمدين بجنيف لخير دليل على عدم احترام واجب الحياد والمثالية بحكم ترأسها لمجلس حقوق الإنسان. السيدات والسادة الحضور، تواصل الحكومة الجزائرية الإصلاحات السياسية والاقتصادية لترسيخ الديمقراطية التشاركية للجزائر الجديدة الهادفة إلى تعزيز سيادة القانون واستقلالية القضاء ومكافحة الفساد وتحديث الإدارة العامة وتفعيل مجتمع مدني حر ومسؤول وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان لجميع ودون استثناء. ومن هذا المنطلق تعمل الجزائر باستمرار على تطوير تشريعاتها وتكييفها وإنشاء الآليات التي تتكفل بترقيتها ومراقبة حسن تنفيذها على غرار اعتمادها في ماي 2023 إطارا قانونيا جديدا للوقاية من الاتجار بالبشر ومكافحته مع تأسيس لجنة وطنية لمتابعة تنفيذ هذا القانون. كما تواصل الجزائر تجسيد التزاماتها إزاء آلية حقوق الإنسان، حيث تم استقبال المقرر الخاص المعني بحرية التجمع السلمي وتكوين الجمعيات، والمقررة الأممية الخاصة المعنية بالمدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان نهاية سنة 2023. وقد تمت هذه الزيارات وبشهادة المقررين أنفسهم في ظروف جيدة، كخطوة تترجم بشكل عملي مدى إرادة الجزائر والتزامها التام بالحوار المثمر وتفتحها للعمل المتعدد الأطراف في ظل الشفافية والاحترام المتبادل والأخذ في الحسبان لخصوصيات الدول. وفي الختام أود أن أؤكد على إرادة الجزائر والتزامها التام والكامل بحماية وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان انطلاقا من إيمانها الراسخ بمبادئ عالمية حقوق الإنسان وعدم قابليتها للتجزئة. شكرا.
I thank you and now give the floor to Bulgaria. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi de commencer par vous féliciter, Votre Excellence, Ambassadeur Omar Zniber, pour votre accession à la présidence du Conseil. Je vous souhaite plein succès dans la promotion du respect et de la protection des droits de l'homme dans le monde. In the context of major global upheavals, Bulgaria underscores the importance of reaffirming multilateralism and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. These include, among others, the respect for humanity, the protection of the dignity of human beings, and the enjoyment of equal rights by all. Russia's ongoing, unprovoked, unjustified, and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine continues to challenge the very foundations of the rules-based international order, the United Nations Charter and international law, including international human rights and humanitarian law. The international community should retain its focus on the need for accountability for the atrocities and mass human rights violations committed in the course of the Russian aggression, as well as for the increasing repression by the Russian authorities against government critics and human rights defenders within the Russian Federation proper, and the overall significant deterioration of the situation of human rights in the country, of which the death of Alexei Navalny is only the latest testimony. Bulgaria is also deeply concerned by the developments in the Middle East, triggered by the brutal terrorist attack of Hamas against Israel on the 7th of October 2023, which initiated the domino of regional instability and the degradation of the humanitarian situation. Bulgaria calls for the immediate release of the hostages taken by Hamas and for urgent measures to address the humanitarian needs of all civilians suffering in Gaza and elsewhere in the Middle East. The promotion and protection of the human rights is one of the main priorities of the Bulgarian foreign policy. Bulgaria views its election for a second time as member of the United Nations Human Rights Council as entailing a responsibility to contribute to strengthening the unique role of the Council in promoting and protecting human rights while affirming their universal character. Our focus will be on combating all forms of discrimination, intolerance, racism, anti-Semitism, and hate speech, on promotion of women and girls' empowerment at all levels and in all spheres of public life, and on combating disinformation and cyber abuse while strengthening media freedom and ensuring the safety of journalists. Bulgaria will continue to support the full realization of the rights of every child. We will further promote universal access to education and will contribute to the efforts to achieve recognition of the right to early childhood care and education and at least 1 year of free pre-primary and free primary and secondary education. Bulgaria will consistently support the independence, integrity and sustainability of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as of the UN Human Rights Council's mechanisms and the UN Human Rights Treaty bodies. The preparations for the summit of the future later this year and the ongoing negotiations on the Pact for the Future in New York should build on the interdependence and indivisibility between human rights, peace and security and sustainable development. We're confident that integrating a strong human rights dimension in the Pact for the Future will further facilitate the strengthening of respect, protection and fulfillment of human rights, with due attention being paid also to the rights of the child. We are determined to spare no time, energy and efforts in the UN Human Rights Council to deliver concrete results in the name of worldwide promotion and protection of human rights. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration, and as announced before, I will now give the floor to the observer states, to begin by Israel. Mrs. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Life as a hostage in Gaza is not life. It is hell. These were the words of Hila Rotem Shoshani, aged 13, a released hostage who was taken captive from Kibbutz Be'eri. For the last 145 days, 134 innocent people have experienced hell itself in terror tunnels of Hamas in Gaza. I speak to you today because they cannot. They cannot describe to you their suffering. They cannot bear witness to the violence they have and continue to endure. I cannot believe that in today's world, innocent people are being held hostage, taken to be a bargaining chip by a terrorist organization who knows no humanity. On October 7th, their lives were ripped apart. Over 250 people were dragged from their homes and torn from their loved ones. Around them, Hamas slaughtered their families, displaying elation as they raped and murdered their friends. Tragically, some never made it to Gaza alive. Others have met their demise at the hands of Hamas while in captivity. Yet their plight has been met with indifference by many in these halls. Their suffering has been relegated to a mere footnote in the discourse of this Council. Through inaction and indifference, the world has allowed them to become pawns in Hamas' cruel game. Their plight is not theirs alone. Their suffering is a burden we must all share. We must do more to reunite sons and daughters, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers. We must demand Hamas, let our people go. Not later, but now. For as long as even a single person remains ensnared in the clutches of terror, we cannot rest. We will work tirelessly to bring them all home. I thank you.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to Mozambique. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Mr. President,
please go ahead.
On behalf of the delegation of Mozambique, we extend our congratulations to you, Mr. President, and all members of the Bureau for your election to the 18th cycle of the Human Rights Council. We also express our appreciation to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, and his entire team for their invaluable work in promoting and protecting human rights globally, and reaffirm our commitment to work with the office. As a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the term 2023-2024, Mozambique has identified peace and security as one of the 4 top priorities, emphasizing the primacy of dialogue. In this context, we are also pleased to co-sponsor a draft resolution focusing on the promotion and strengthening of the culture of peace during this session, along with a group of countries, and encourage all members to extend their support to this resolution. Mr. President, despite progress in countering terrorism in Cabo Delgado, a significant humanitarian crisis persists, particularly due to the recent developments. The surge in internal displacement resulting from these attacks has dramatically worsened living conditions for both the affected population and host communities. In this context, we appreciate the visit of the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of Internally Displaced Persons, Paulo Gaviria Betancourt, to Mozambique, from November 9 to 21, 2023, which provided valuable insights and necessary recommendations. Mr. President, in conclusion, Mr. President, Mozambique reaffirms its commitment within the Human Rights Council to promote universal and effective respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, aiming to safeguard the dignity and worth of every woman person. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration. وأعطي الكلمة الآن لوفد عمان. السيد السفير لكم الكلمة.
شكرا سعادة الرئيس. اسمحوا لي أن أتقدم بالشكر والتحية لجميع المشاركين في الدورة ولشخصكم الكريم، وإننا إذ نهنئكم على انتخابكم فإننا نتمنى لكم الثبات في هذه الفترة التي تشهد هجومات شرسة ضد الأمم المتحدة ممثلة في شخص أمينها العام السيد غوتيريش وضد بعض المنظمات الدولية. سعادة الرئيس، بالرغم من تحقيق العديد من الإنجازات في مجال حقوق الإنسان وفي تسيير العلاقات الدولية، فإن المنظومة الدولية ومنظومة حقوق الإنسان خاصة ظلت تراكم الفشل في حل القضية الفلسطينية، ومن أبرز تجلياته ما نشهده حاليا من شن حرب إبادة جماعية ضد شعب غزة المحاصر منذ سنوات، مع ما يصاحب ذلك من جرائم تهجير قسري وجرائم حرب ترتكب وسط صمت وعجز وتواطؤ المجتمع الدولي، وهي الجرائم التي قامت منظومة الأمم المتحدة منذ 75 عاما لأجل ألا تتكرر وتتكرر معها مآسي الحربين العالميتين. سعادة الرئيس، إن تشديد جهود المجلس وإغراق أجندته بالقضايا الفرعية والمستحدثة يساهم في إضعاف القضايا الهامة ويحرف المسار عن تحقيق أهداف التنمية، حيث تعتقد سلطنة عمان جازمة أن هناك قضايا هامة ومصيرية على غرار القضية الفلسطينية التي يجب أن يسارع المجتمع الدولي إلى حلها عبر آلياته المختلفة قبل الغرق في جزئيات وترف ورفاه مجتمعات الاستهلاك. سعادة الرئيس، تستعيد سلطنة عمان بعد 53 عاما خطاب ممثلها الأول لدى الجمعية العامة المغفور له سمو السيد طارق بن تيمور آل سعيد الاقتباس: لقد تابعنا دائما عن كثب القضايا المعروضة على هذه الجمعية للنظر فيها وتسويتها، وكثيرا ما يتم التقليل من فعالية الأمم المتحدة وتقويض أهدافها من خلال رفض بعض الدول لنتائجها وعدم الامتثال لقراراتها. وهنا يكمن الخطر الأكبر على هذه المنظمة وفائدتها. إننا نؤمن إيمانا راسخا بأنه لا ينبغي السماح لأي دولة أن تمتلك حق النقض ضد قراراتها، ونأمل بصدق ألا يظل الظلم المخزي الذي لحق بالشعب العربي في فلسطين وصمة عار في سجلات الأمم المتحدة. انتهى الاقتباس. شكرا سعادة الرئيس.
أشكركم. La parole maintenant est au Saint-Siège. Monsieur l'ambassadeur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last December, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Whilst a significant milestone in humanity's progress, my delegation remains concerned with ongoing violations of human rights. Many of the challenges we face today, including in the fields of artificial intelligence, the crisis of multilateralism, religious freedom, often stem from a lack of respect for human dignity and a failure to recognize our interconnectedness. We must not forget that human dignity lies at the heart of the Universal Declaration, and it provides the only roadmap to an integral and just development, as well as for deep and lasting peace. Putting human dignity back at the center of our discussions has the potential to help international organizations avoid polarization, paralysis, and ideological colonization. Yet current attempts to introduce so-called new rights are not always consistent with what is truly good for the human person. Our societies must continue to rise on the foundations of a right understanding of universal fraternity and respect for the sacredness of every human life, of every man and every woman, the poor, the elderly, children, the infirm, the unborn, the unemployed, the abandoned, those considered disposable because they are only considered as part of a statistic. Human fraternity and solidarity must also be at the heart of our work. As Pope Francis has repeatedly emphasized, everything is connected and no one is saved alone. As Article 1 of the Declaration indicates, fraternity has been a core value of the multilateral system since its foundation and is an essential condition for the full realization of human rights today. It is my delegation's hope that these principles of dignity and fraternity will guide the work of the Council in the weeks ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie Votre Éminence pour votre déclaration. And now I give the floor to the Russian Federation. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Господин председатель, права человека сегодня превратились в сферу, которую страны коллективного Запада и их союзники активно используют для достижения собственных геополитических задач. Для этого задействуется Совет ООН по правам человека, целенаправленно расшатывается внутриполитическая стабильность в суверенных государствах, используется незаконная практика введения односторонних принудительных мер. Цинизм этих стран достиг таких масштабов, что на него уже невозможно не реагировать. Не мог оставить это без реакции и Международный суд ООН, принявший 31 января решение в рамках инспирированного Украиной разбирательства с Россией. В своем вердикте он отверг все обвинения в адрес нашей страны, в том числе касающиеся расовой дискриминации и финансирования терроризма. Тем самым Международный суд полностью дезавуирует принятые СПЧ антироссийские резолюции, признавая ничтожными претензии и обвинения, на которых базируются эти документы. Данное судебное решение наглядно демонстрирует, что в основе указанных резолюций лежат клеветнические утверждения украинских властей и их западных спонсоров. Это же относится и к докладам ОВКПЧ, которые тиражируют измышления, сфабрикованные наблюдательной миссией ООН по правам человека на Украине и независимой международной комиссией по расследованию событий в этой стране. И не признавать этого Верховному комиссару господину Тюрку и его сотрудникам теперь нельзя. Решение Международного суда наглядно показывает, что этим докладом, подготовленным ОВКПЧ с использованием диктуемых западными донорами критериев, доверия нет. Благодарю вас.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration and now give the floor to the United Nations Population Fund. UNPF, it seems, are you in the room? If not, then I move to the next speaker, delegation of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. The Republic of Srpska, one of two entities that make up Bosnia and Herzegovina, is dedicated to preservation of the 1995 Dayton Accords and insists on their faithful implementation. The Republic of Srpska has consistently demonstrated dedication to the Dayton Accords, which include a commitment to peace and to fully respecting BiH, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and constitutional order. Unfortunately, the heart of Dayton Accords, the BiH Constitution, has been under attack for many years by International High Representative and other foreign actors who, through their illegal assertion of lawmaking powers, have centralized BiH in defiance of the BiH Constitution. Through exclusively legal and peaceful means, the Republic of Srpska is opposing such illegal action and defending against the further erosion of BiH Constitution. The Dayton Accords did not assign any authority to the AHR to impose decision on BiH or its citizens, let alone to decree the law and impose extrajudicial punishment. The last legitimately appointed AHR left BiH in 2021, and the UN Security Council, the only body with authority to approve the appointment of AHR, failed to approve a successor. Despite this, a retired German politician named Christian Schmidt arrived in BiH shortly thereafter, falsely claiming to be a new AHR. Since his arrival, Mr. Schmidt has employed the claimed dictatorial authorities of the AHR, promiscuously and oppressively using dozens of rash, ill-conceived decrees without any democratic or legal legitimacy whatsoever, and in so doing has severely jeopardized BiH political stability. No one, including even legitimately appointed AHR, has a legal authority to enact the law in BiH by edict. Such a claimed authority plainly violates BiH democratic constitutional system for enacting laws and the AHR narrowly limited mandate under the Dayton Accords, in addition to violating the most basic human rights guaranteed under international law. Mr. Schmidt's attempt to criminalize failure to implement his illegal decrees marks a dangerous and despicable escalation in foreign repression of BiH that in fact turns BiH into a police state commanded by unselected German despot. Today, Republic of Srpska officials are being prosecuted under Mr. Schmidt's fictitious law by an unconstitutional prosecutor office in an unconstitutional court acting to enforce a tyrannical, anti-democratic, illegal decree of a foreign unlawfully claiming unrestricted power to rule BIH by decree against legally elected and appointed officials who simply carried out formal procedure they were legally required to execute. The indictments are intolerable attack against BIH, sovereignty and democratic constitutional order, and the rejection of rule of law in favor of rule by one man backed up foreign political and military power. The exercise of such unrestrained tyrannical power and continued violation of human rights in BIH by Mr. Schmidt and other foreign actors must stop. It is necessary, without the interference of the foreign factor, to agree and adapt changes to election law in accordance with the decision of the Constitutional Court of BIH in order to enable each of three constituents people to elect legitimate political representative to the presidency and upper house of the House of People, taking into consideration that BIH is a multinational state of three constituents, people and others. Thank you.
I thank Your Excellency for your declaration, and now the floor is for the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees by video.
Your Excellencies, I speak to you at a particularly critical time. As of September last year, we have seen more than 114 million people forcibly displaced around the globe due to war, conflict, and persecution. New displacement crises continue to outpace the solutions being found. Against this backdrop, UNHCR is continuing to work with states and other stakeholders to protect and uphold the human rights of forcibly displaced and stateless people and to provide them with critical assistance. Mr. President, despite the immense challenges before us, we still see significant opportunities and commitment among many in our global community. This was demonstrated in especially powerful terms at the Global Refugee Forum in December last year, where we saw more than 1,600 pledges recorded. These pledges express the commitment not only of states, but also of a whole range of other committed actors in a whole-of-society approach and to achieving transformational change. We also look forward to the upcoming October launch of the Global Alliance to End Statelessness, which represents a collective multi-stakeholder initiative with the goal to expedite comprehensive solutions to statelessness. Another key area where there is a potential to do better together is on mixed movements of refugees and migrants. Responding more effectively and predictably to the challenges of mixed population movements requires a broader whole-of-route approach. Adopting innovative approaches in ensuring international protection and solutions for refugees, while upholding human rights and creating opportunities for migrants along key routes are critical. We urge the member and observer states of this Council to come together to address the protection of human rights and humanitarian crises we are currently facing, and to seize the opportunities provided by new, innovative, and collective approaches to addressing displacement and statelessness. Thank you.
I thank you on behalf of the UNHCR. And the next speaker is Azerbaijan. Mr. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Mr. President, the counteroffensive operation of 2020 and counterterrorism measures of September 2023, successfully realized by Azerbaijan in the exercise of its right to self-defense under the UN Charter, has put an end to the 30 years long military aggression and occupation of its territories by Armenia, and to the dismantling of the puppet separatist regime established under its control. Azerbaijan has fully restored its territorial integrity and sovereignty and has been promoting a peace agenda in the region. Our efforts are aimed at normalizing relations with Armenia, rebuilding and reconstructing plundered and devastated territories, and administering justice to those guilty of atrocity crimes committed against our people. Despite our objections, Armenia and her protagonists continue to erroneously refer to Karabakh region of Azerbaijan as the so-called Nagorno-Karabakh. Until we hear such open claims to our territorial integrity, Azerbaijan will continue in accordance with the UN Charter to prevent and eliminate by all available means threats to security and prosperity of its nation. The territories liberated from occupation have been massively and indiscriminately contaminated with mines by Armenia.
which take innocent lives and impede safe and dignified return of IDPs, and efforts to establish the fate of missing persons. We call on High Commissioner Turk and Armenia to address the human rights of Western Azerbaijani community forcibly expelled from their ancestral homelands. It is a high time for the Council to effectively address the situation of isolation and restrictive measures imposed on the population of Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Thank you.
I thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your declaration. The floor is for Lesotho. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Lesotho.
Mr. President,
Yes, please go ahead.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I feel honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the Kingdom of Lesotho at this 55th session of the Human Rights Council. We embrace the Council with high regard, look up to its sessions with eagerness, and hope for sincere discussions that advance human rights, the world at large. As we continue to celebrate 75th anniversary of the UDHR, it is important to implement founding principles and standards enshrined therein to make enjoyment of human rights a reality worldwide. Some of the important reasons why we have these sessions are to get together to discuss and highlight the specific human rights issues and to encourage each other to take part in the human rights discourse for us and the people we represent. Mr. President, high level of unemployment, prevalence of HIV/AIDS, and the recent natural disasters are a great challenge to the full and equal enjoyment of human rights in Lesotho. Although these challenges and others threaten progress on SDGs, promotion and protection of human rights remain at the core of government's agenda, and thus Lesotho remains committed to abide by her international human rights obligations. In this regard, Lesotho appreciates continued technical and financial support that she's receiving from the UN agencies and individual countries. In conclusion, I verily reiterate Lesotho's commitment to cooperate with the Human Rights Council to attain the cornerstones of democracy, good governance, and human rights. I thank you.
I thank you, Madame, on behalf of Lesotho. La parole est au Niger, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais d'abord vous réitérer nos chaleureuses félicitations et à travers vous aux autres membres du Bureau pour votre brillante élection à la présidence du Conseil et vous assurer de la coopération de mon pays dans l'accomplissement de votre mandat. Ma délégation félicite également le haut-commissaire pour l'organisation de ce segment de haut niveau après l'organisation réussie de l'événement de haut niveau en décembre 2023 dédié à la commémoration du 75e anniversaire de la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme. Monsieur le Président, en dépit des événements militaires intervenus à la tête de l'État le 26 juillet 2023, le Niger reste profondément attaché au respect et à la promotion des droits de l'homme universellement reconnus. Les autorités militaires et le gouvernement établi adhèrent pleinement au principe de libre choix des gouvernants par le peuple, au moyen cependant d'un système transparent dans lequel la volonté du peuple n'est pas confisquée, les opposants ne sont pas inquiétés et les défenseurs des droits de l'homme totalement libres de s'exprimer ou de manifester, toutes choses qui justifient l'action de sauvegarde de la patrie qu'ils ont entreprise depuis lors. La tenue prochaine d'un dialogue national inclusif qui regroupera toutes les couches vives de la nation posera en toute souveraineté les fondements d'une nouvelle vie constitutionnelle basée sur des piliers profondément ancrés dans nos valeurs traditionnelles et républicaines. Aussi, le Niger, qui fait face aux attaques terroristes depuis plus d'une décennie, poursuit ses efforts de lutte antiterroriste dans le respect strict des droits de la personne humaine. À ce titre, ma délégation s'indigne des violations massives des droits de l'homme qu'elle observe quotidiennement à Gaza sous le fallacieux prétexte de lutte contre le terrorisme et interpelle la conscience de leurs auteurs, actifs comme moraux. Enfin, le Niger réaffirme son attachement au principe d'universalité, d'indivisibilité des droits de l'homme, de non-discrimination et de non-politisation de l'examen des situations pays et rejette toute forme d'ingérence et de mesures coercitives, unilatérales ou concertées, contre d'autres pays en raison de leurs contradictions flagrantes avec tous les instruments et objectifs mondiaux relatifs à la promotion, à la protection et à la jouissance des droits politiques, économiques, sociaux et culturels par l'ensemble des peuples de la planète. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie Votre Excellence pour votre intervention et je donne la parole au Cap-Vert. Madame l'ambassadrice, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, President. Mr. President, the delegation of Cape Verde would first like to congratulate you on your election as President of the Council and express its full readiness to work with you and the members of the Council to strengthen dialogue and achievements in the field of human rights. Mr. President, we have entered a new annual cycle of the Council during which, unfortunately, and as has happened on several occasions, we are confronted with an international context of heightened tensions and conflicts that continue to jeopardize the global promotion of human rights. The items on our proposed agenda for this session reflect the high level of commitment we want the Council to have to the issues of human rights, particularly at the crossroads we find ourselves at, which requires greater responsibility on the part of the world's nations and leaders to find peaceful and lasting solutions to such crises. We recall the Council's decisions expressed in different resolutions on the rights to food, the role of good governance, the rights of people with disabilities, children's rights, the environment and climate change concerns, while encouraging the Council and all parties concerned to fulfill their role to fully achieve the objectives advocated in each of the resolutions adopted. Cape Verde remains steadfast in its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights in their most varied dimensions and reiterates the vital role of the Human Rights Council, which offers us a unique opportunity to unite and continue together, placing human rights at the center of our efforts. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you, Madame, on behalf of Cabo Verde. Je donne maintenant la parole à Madagascar. Votre Excellence, vous avez la parole.
Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi d'abord de vous transmettre les regrets de Madame la ministre des Affaires étrangères, qui ne peut pas être parmi nous, malgré son souhait de prendre part à cette importante session. Ma délégation félicite le Maroc pour son élection à la présidence du Conseil pour l'année 2024 et lui adresse ses vœux de succès pour son mandat. La protection des droits de l'homme fait partie des engagements internationaux de Madagascar, qu'il considère comme une condition sine qua non de son objectif de développement. C'est dans ce sens que le gouvernement malagasy réaffirme sa volonté de travailler avec le Conseil et le Haut Commissariat aux droits de l'homme sur la base d'une nouvelle feuille de route qui contribuera davantage à atteindre notre objectif commun. Mesdames et Messieurs, mon pays vient d'achever son élection présidentielle en novembre dernier. Madagascar se félicite de la consolidation de la démocratie et de l'état de droit et d'une continuité de l'ordre constitutionnel qui constitue une base essentielle pour la réalisation des droits de ses citoyens. Dans le cadre de son second mandat, Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République, Andry Rajoelina, a partagé la politique générale de l'État, qui se concentre sur 3 piliers, le capital humain, l'industrialisation et la bonne gouvernance. La bonne gouvernance se traduit notamment par le renforcement du cadre législatif et la réforme des textes existants, et miser sur le capital humain requiert un arsenal juridique qui protège tous les citoyens de tout âge. C'est dans ce cadre que le Parlement vient de voter une loi renforçant la lutte contre les abus sexuels sur les enfants, afin de protéger la dignité humaine et les droits de l'enfant. Par ailleurs, le gouvernement s'attelle à poursuivre la transformation structurelle de l'économie malagasy dans le but d'améliorer les conditions de vie de la population et réaliser les droits économiques, sociaux et culturels. Pour les autres droits, Madagascar procède à l'opérationnalisation des structures inhérentes à ses engagements internationaux, à l'instar de la mise en place du mécanisme national de prévention de la torture. Madagascar accueille favorablement le soutien que les Nations Unies sont disposées à fournir dans le cadre de la préparation de son prochain EPU. Enfin, Nous soutenons les efforts qui visent à renforcer les mécanismes de protection des droits de l'homme à l'échelle mondiale et nous appelons à une action collective pour promouvoir la justice, l'égalité et la dignité pour tous. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, pour votre déclaration. And now we will hear the representative of the National Human Rights Institution and civil society representatives, to begin by the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions by video.
سيد الرئيس، تحية طيبة وبعد. إن عام 2024 يشكل علامة فارقة لحقوق، ففيه نحتفل بالذكرى ال40 لاتفاقية مناهضة التعذيب وغيره من ضروب المعاملة أو العقوبة القاسية واللا إنسانية أو المهينة. تشهد هذه الاتفاقية المحورية على التزامنا المشترك بالمبادئ الأساسية للكرامة الإنسانية والعدالة ومنع القسوة، رغم ما تواجهه هذه القيم اليوم من تحديات كبيرة في ظل الأزمات التي يشهدها العالم من تزايد عدد حالات التعذيب وغيره من ضروب سوء المعاملة في جميع العالم. ولا ننسى هنا دور مؤسسات حقوق الإنسان باعتبارها الركائز الأساسية للجهود الجماعية المبذولة لبناء عالم خال من آفة التعذيب، المنعقد في نوفمبر الماضي باعتماد المؤسسات الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان من العالم أجمع لإعلان كوبنهاجن كيب ملزمين أنفسهم بتكثيف جهودهم المبذولة لمنع التعذيب وغيره من ضروب سوء المعاملة والتصدي لها. تكمن أهمية هذا الإعلان فيما يتضمنه من مجموعة الإجراءات العملية التي يتعين على المؤسسات الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان اتخاذها لمنع التعذيب والحماية من كافة ضروب سوء المعاملة باتباع نهج يركز على الضحايا وإيلاء اهتمام خاص بحقوق الفئات الضعيفة. سيد الرئيس، ندرك تماما ضرورة إعادة تكريس أنفسنا من جديد لإعمال مبادئ الاتفاقية، كما نؤكد بموجبه على دعوة كافة الدول إلى حماية ومؤازرة المؤسسات الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان القائمة وإنشاء مؤسسات وطنية جديدة لحقوق الإنسان في مناطق جديدة بما يتوافق مع مبادئ باريس. وختاما، فإننا نؤكد على استمرار التحالف العالمي للمؤسسات الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان في دعم المؤسسات الوطنية لحقوق الإنسان في العالم أجمع أثناء قيامها بحماية والدفاع عن حقوق وكرامة الجميع. تفضلوا بقبول فائق الاحترام والتقدير.
أشكركم على مداخلاتكم، والآن سنستمع للمنظمات غير الحكومية وبداية بالسيدة باسي مبالمة. Mrs. Basi Mubalama, you have the floor. By video, sorry.
Bonjour. Aujourd'hui, je vous raconte l'histoire des Zawadi. Zawadi est une maman de 9 enfants, mais elle ne connaît pas le père de son 8e enfant. Elle a été violée par des rebelles alors qu'elle fuyait les affrontements dans son village. Par peur de représailles, elle n'a jamais dit à personne ce qui s'était réellement passé. Les auteurs de ce viol étaient 3 hommes armés non autrement identifiés. Chaque année, des milliers de femmes dans le monde, en particulier en Afrique subsaharienne, sont victimes des conflits armés. Ces conflits violents, parfois liés à l'extrémisme, n'épargnent pas les femmes, les jeunes filles et même les petits enfants. Les femmes que nous accompagnons sont des femmes qui ont été victimes des exécutions arbitraires, des arrestations, des cas de viol, des agressions sexuelles, ainsi que plusieurs autres formes de violences basées sur le genre. D'autres sont prises en esclavage sexuel, embrigadées dans des déplacements forcés. La violence sexuelle exercée sur les femmes, les jeunes filles et même les enfants est très répandue dans des situations de conflit. Elle est utilisée comme une tactique de guerre. Dans le monde, la violence sexuelle est utilisée comme une arme de guerre et une arme politique. À travers le monde, de nombreuses actions sont menées Mais la majorité des acteurs travaillent sur les conséquences de la guerre et non sur la prévention et les causes profondes des conflits. Le silence partout dans le monde qui entoure ces atrocités, ces crimes de guerre et crimes contre l'humanité, le silence face à ces femmes, ces jeunes filles et même ces petits-enfants qui perdent leur dignité et dont la vie est souvent brisée et inimaginable et inacceptable. Aujourd'hui, nous appelons l'ONU, les États membres à des actions urgentes, à mobiliser collectivement les ressources pour mettre fin aux conflits et à la violence qui malheureusement détruisent la vie des femmes et des jeunes filles et qui renforcent tragiquement les inégalités entre les hommes et les femmes. Nous ne pouvons plus attendre demain. Demain sera peut-être trop tard.
Je vous remercie, Madame, pour votre intervention et je donne maintenant la parole à Monsieur Marcelo Cohen, présent parmi nous. Vous avez la parole, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the threshold of the first quarter of the 21st century, the widespread development of war directly impacts on human rights at all their dimensions. The idea that war is a means to settle conflicts or to advance just causes has proven to be a deep mistake time and again. To this culture of force, it is necessary to oppose the culture of peace. The right to life, together with the right to dignity, are the two most important and fundamental human rights. Hundreds of thousands of human beings, including children and elderly people, have been deprived of them. International humanitarian law is just a stopgap within an international legal system that prohibits the threat or the use of force. Even its basic foundations, particularly the protection of the civilian population, are widely ignored in multiple scenarios. How can we reach this stage of lack of humanity? How can we speak about human rights if their elementary rules are disregarded and the international community not only is unable to stop their breaches, but gives the impression of being resigned to this state of affairs? The credibility of the multilateral system and international law, including human rights, is at stake. The time of inertia and sterile confrontation must finish before it is too late. Exponential aggravation of conflicts can lead to a major tragedy. The point is to put rationality in the search for concrete solutions. This Council is a political organ, not a judicial one. Its main concern should be to find a common ground for the promotion of human rights, notwithstanding the divergences. Peace and security are preconditions for the enjoyment of all human rights. Peace often implies some risks. War, instead, implies certitudes, death, devastation, hate. Learn the lessons from the period preceding the major catastrophe of the 20th century. The mission of this Council is to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank you, sir, for your declaration, and now give the floor to Mr. Tobias Rosen by video.
Distinguished delegates, honorees, excellencies, dear ladies and gentlemen, and all in between, social protection. Although not universally accepted as a standalone human right, social protection is closely linked to existing human rights principles. Over the life cycle, social protection should ensure access to health care and a basic income security, well-being, preserving the dignity of all people in all age groups. From a civil society perspective, social protection should have the accurate status and is a must-have for all nations, not a nice-to-have. It is not only good for the individual persons, but also for the whole society. Social protection is one of the best investments in society, and it guarantees a stronger welfare system, more respect and human dignity, and less violence and criminality. The right to social security encompasses the right to access and maintain benefits, whether in cash or in kind, without discrimination in order to secure protection inter alia from lack of work-related income caused by sickness, disability, maternity, employment injury, unemployment, old age, or death of a family member, unaffordable access to health care, insufficient family support, particularly for children and adult dependents. National representatives should be familiar with the existing data provided by Human Rights Committee and ILO. CSO sees the support from UN agencies to integrate a suitable social protection system into national policies. Social protection unifies societies and it realizes the most possible inequality between the citizens. Social protection is the most valuable system to reduce harm, exploitation, poverty, and hunger, most of the core conditions of tensions and conflict. National governments who invest in social protection will see a more peaceful society where people can solve not only health, but also social problems in families, communities, and at working places. Protected human rights have the capacity to overcome violations. We as CSO support the implementation into national policies. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you, sir, for your declaration. And the last speaker on behalf of the NGOs this afternoon will be Mrs. Shizuko Suzuki, also by video.
There has never been a time than now when fostering life and love is needed. While the international community is facing multiple conflicts and wars, it is unarguable everyone must be ensured that access to the education that raises awareness and knowledge towards the universal values, life and love. How to cultivate such sublime but abstract values may not be an easy question. Then we should draw our attention to an education which lays its foundation on life and love, that is, comprehensive sexuality education, CSE, developed by UNESCO. In fact, it is regrettable so many young people, particularly girls worldwide, have been deprived of their rights to pursue further study and career due to unexpected pregnancies, only because they haven't had proper knowledge and skills to avoid the risks. Actually, CSE has not yet been practiced in many nations and just accessed by a limited number of the youths, probably owing to traditional norms or even myths and insufficient understanding of the aims and contents of the CSE. Although CSE has already been highly evaluated with substantial evidences according to UNESCO. It is, however, welcomed. Recently, some local government assemblies have started to discuss the introduction of CSE into public schools. In collaboration with these municipal authorities, civil society organizations which have committed themselves to promote CSE will be able to enhance their performance of advocacy. After all, to protect young people's rights to fulfill their potential by implementing comprehensive sexuality education will lead to realizing the world peace. Thank you very much.
I thank you, dear Madame, for your declaration. Vos Excellences, distingués représentants, au regard du temps qui nous reste pour cette réunion de ce matin, au titre de la session actuelle du Conseil des droits de l'homme, je pense que nous avons encore suffisamment de temps pour partager les éléments sur les procédures organisationnelles de notre session. Je vais donc les prononcer devant vous en attirant l'attention que notre session de cet après-midi, notre réunion de cet après-midi, la 7e en l'occurrence, débutera par l'exercice des droits de réponse au regard du débat qui a eu lieu au titre de la session de haut niveau et du segment général. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we still have more than 5 weeks ahead of us, with 7 panel discussions, 23 interactive dialogues with special procedures, mandate holders, and expert mechanism, 2 interactive dialogues with the special representatives of the Secretary General, 8 interactive dialogues with the High Commissioner, 5 dialogues with international and investigative mechanisms, and 5 high-level and enhanced interactive dialogues. The Council will also adopt 14 outcomes of the UPR. In addition, you will recall that during the organizational meeting held on 12 February, the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo had requested the Council to add to the program of work for the 55th session an enhanced interactive dialogue on the oral update by the High Commissioner and the team of international experts on the situation of human rights in the country. The Democratic Republic of the Congo had recalled that previous resolutions had included the enhanced interactive dialogue on the oral updates of the High Commissioner and the team of the international expert, and indicated that the dialogue for the 55th session had been left out of Council Resolution 54/34 due to oversight. Taking note of the explanation by the Democratic Republic of Congo, on 21st February, the Bureau agreed to propose this enhanced interactive dialogue to be added to the program of work. The Bureau further reminded penholders of resolutions to ensure that all desired activities are included in the draft resolutions that are presented to the Human Rights Council for adoption. I now propose for the consideration of and approval by the Council the draft program of work, including the enhanced interactive dialogue on the oral update by the High Commissioner and the team of international experts on the situation of human rights in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, with the understanding that the program of work is an evolving document and that further adjustments may be required according to the progress of our work. Are there any members of the Council wishing to comment on this proposal, meaning to approve the draft program of work? I see none. It is then adopted. Excellencies, dear participants, as far as states are concerned, the online system for inscription on the list of speakers for all interactive dialogues, general debates and panel discussions opened on Monday, 19 February at 4 p.m. and closes 24 hours before the meeting in which the debate is scheduled to start. Once the online inscription has closed, delegation may still inscribe or withdraw by sending an email to the list of speakers desk. The list of speakers closes approximately 15 minutes after the beginning of each debate. The online system for inscription on the list of speakers for the adoptions of the UPR outcomes will open on Monday, 11 March at 9 a.m. and will close on Thursday, 14 March at 6 p.m. As you know, no inscription will be possible after this deadline. For non-governmental organizations, the list of speakers for all debates taking place during the session opened online on Tuesday, 20 February at 2 p.m. I would like to reiterate that all participants should uphold the Word version of their oral statement through the online systems for the list of speakers. I would also like to take this opportunity to strongly encourage all of you to respect the speaking time limits for all debates and to exercise self-restraint in the preparation of your statements. Along with the Vice Presidents, I will ensure that meetings begin on time and that speaking time limits are strictly observed by everyone, knowing, as announced before, that we will have a very heavy schedule for all the weeks ahead and that we have an obligation, hopefully, to end this session on the 5th of April. So I call your attention, please, on these very important observations. Excellencies, dear participants, allow me to recall that the deadline of the submission of draft proposal to be adopted during the 55th session is set for Thursday, 21st of March at 1 p.m. Only under exceptional circumstances can an extension of deadline for the submission of draft proposals be approved by the Council, and for a maximum of 24 hours. The submission of a proposal after the submission deadlines needs prior approval by the Council before it is registered by the Secretariat. Let me also underline that in accordance with paragraph 113 and 117 of Resolution 5/1, delegations are invited to conduct open-ended and formal consultation to secure the broadest possible support for their initiatives At least one informal open-ended consultation should be held on each draft resolution and/or decision before it is considered for action by the Council. In the interest of ensuring the effective participation of all stakeholders in the work of the Human Rights Council, I encourage the main sponsor of draft proposal to share their draft texts also with civil society, organizations, and other observers that followed informal consultation. These aspects have effectively been referred to during the meeting I had with civil society, so please, it is under your attention. Concerning reprisals, Excellencies, dear participants, the active participation of representatives of civil society and national human rights institutions in the work of the Human Rights Council is essential to the fulfillment of its mandate. As President of this Council, I can assure you that I will follow up on all allegations brought to my attention of acts of reprisals or intimidation committed against persons in connection to their contribution to the work of the Human Rights Council, its mechanisms and procedures. I call on everyone to take all necessary measures to prevent such acts in the first place and to ensure that they are promptly and seriously addressed in case they were to happen. Concerning the respect for mandate holders and condemnation of personal attacks, I would like to stress our collective responsibility to cooperate with all the mandates established by this Council. Mandate holders are sometimes the subject of derogatory remarks and personal attacks or threats in the course of their work, including at this Council. This is unacceptable. Disagreement with mandate holders can always be expressed, even in a robust manner. It is, however, unacceptable that mandate holders are insulted publicly or otherwise, or personally attacked or threatened when discharging their mandate. I urge all of you to preserve the integrity and legitimacy of mandate holders and treat them with the respect they deserve. With this brings us to the end of our procedure and organizational matters I had to present before you this afternoon. And with this, we then, for this afternoon, what is planned is that we will reconvene at 3 p.m., as I said, to begin with the right of reply relating to the statements delivered during the high level and the general statement. We will then hold the enhanced interactive dialogue on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, to be followed by the interactive dialogue of the High Commissioner reports on the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, and the obligation to ensure accountability and justice. With that, I will close now our 6th meeting of the 55th session of the Human Rights, and please have a nice afternoon.